The story opens with a young boy announcing that he is a wizard while he and a girl participate in play fighting. She acts as a monster that eats wizards, so he raises his wooden branch and hits her on the head. She yells out and asks why he actually hit her, while he explains that monsters are meant to lose against wizards. An elderly man observes the children and remarks on how lively they are this morning. The boy recognizes the man as Rabbus. He then inquires about what is needed to become a wizard, while Rabbus clarifies that one cannot simply become one by wishing for it. He describes wizards as the peak of humanity who rule from the highest social ranks, adding that they are nobles and knights who inherited the ability to use magic from their ancestors. He informs the children that they unfortunately cannot become wizards, while a nearby villager asks the elder how he could say such a thing before asking if current rumors are true. Rabbus asks for clarification on what he is referring to, and the man mentions hearing news that a monster has appeared. He confirms that the report is indeed true. He notes that a man named Rop came across it at the entrance last night and describes a creature covered in pitch-black shadows that was a leopard the size of a house. He reassures the man not to worry because the village chief went to the city to request a wizard and believes he will bring one back to subjugate the beast. The girl's mother expresses her relief at this news. She asks her daughter if she heard that and warns her not to go into the forest for now. Rabbus cautions everyone to be careful since killing a monster is almost impossible without a wizard. The villager asks if all the residents have been informed, and when he says they have, he asks if a certain person has been told as well. Rabbus asks who he is talking about. The man explains that he is referring to the shepherd on Hisarul Hill. High up on the hill, we see a shepherd named Turan. He rests while looking up at the sky and thinks about how dull his life has become. He reflects on viewing the same scenery and the same day over and over again. He wonders if he will eventually forget how to speak. Rabbus arrives and calls him a pathetic brat. He remarks that the sun hasn't even set yet and he is already slacking off, while Turan tells him to move because he is blocking the sunlight. Rabbus yells that he lacks manners and asks if he is still holding onto a grudge from a past incident. Turan asks if he is talking about the time his mother died, and the old man tried to quietly turn the sheep into shared property. Rabbus simply clears his throat in response. Turan says that if that is what he means, then yes, declaring that he is not generous enough to share his mother's inheritance and stating they are not close enough for pleasantries before telling him to leave. Rabbus shouts in frustration at the young man. Turan glares back and asks what he wants. He informs him that a monster has appeared, causing the shepherd to ask about it. Rabbus explains that it is a leopard the size of a house that Rop found. Turan admits that the situation is a serious problem, while Rabbus notices that he is not even scared despite being the most likely target. He tells him to be careful since the village chief went to request a wizard. He claims he only came because he was worried about him, but Turan thinks the old man is not being very honest. He suggests the man was actually worried about the sheep and not him, as Rabbus prepares to shout again. Turan tells him to get lost if he is done talking because his breath smells like rot. The old man walks away into the distance. Turan reflects on how monsters are beasts that wield mysterious power and magic. He considers that if humans have wizards, then beasts have monsters. He is pleased that a wizard is coming because it means he can finally see one in person. However, he wonders if a wizard summoned by a rural village chief will even be anything special. Still, he wants to see just how strong they truly are. Suddenly, his nose catches a whiff of something. Turan realizes the smell is coming from blood. He heads down into the forest and follows the scent. He says he is sure the source is in this direction. He focuses harder on the scent and walks in that direction, but suddenly he stops. He looks down and sees Rabbus torn into literal pieces on the ground. He thinks about how the man told him to be careful, yet went in first anyway, reflecting that he did not expect the blood smell to belong to Rabbus. He notes that this is not a wound an ordinary wild animal could make. He is sure that it has to be the monster. He hears something approaching as a massive paw lands on the ground and a large monster appears. Turan looks back while the monster creeps closer and he stares directly at it, realizing that the reports were true and a monster really exists. Back in the village, the boy playing wizard asks his father how strong a monster is, and if it is true that adults cannot beat it. His father says they are insanely powerful, explaining that if ordinary adults rush it, they won't even be able to collect their bones. The child asks what will happen to their village if they cannot beat it. He tells the boy not to worry because the village chief will bring a wizard to subjugate the beast. The boy asks if the wizard will lose to the monster. His father says that of course they won't lose, describing them as great beings born with the power of magic who will kill the monster with a single word. As the beast lunges at Turan, he looks at it and commands it to die. The command causes the monster to backpedal and create distance. It snarls at him as he releases an aura. He wonders if his power is not working. The monster leaps again and he tells it to stop. The creature pulls back once again. He reflects that he knew killing it would not work but wonders why it cannot even be stopped. The monster attacks but Turan dodges the strike. The beast turns and sees him off to the side. Turan decides on a plan and reaches into his coat. He pulls out a rock and says that a shepherd should do what a shepherd does. The beast prepares another strike. He tells the stone to harden and places it in his sling, while his eyes glow gold as he tells the stone to become faster and swings the sling. He takes a step forward and tells the stone to pierce through. The stone flies with a speed that seems to break the sound barrier. The rock flies toward the beast at full speed, and it is so fast that the monster can only dodge it slightly. The stone grazes the beast while cutting its ear and flying into the air. The beast dashes towards him with its mouth open and ready for a final attack. Turan says that it is actually aiming for the head. The rock suddenly stops in the air. It twirls and smashes into the back of the monster's skull, blowing it off. He stands over the corpse and reflects that this is his first time using the move on a monster. He wonders if he should toss the carcass into some valley. He grumbles that those village bastards really put him to work. Turan is a wizard. He realized his special abilities 8 years ago while he was only 10, at which time the young boy made logs fly through the air. Excitedly telling his mother to watch the logs flying, the child called out to her and announced his ability to create fire and wind. But his mother screamed for him to stop, and he reflects that it was the first and last time she ever got angry. Asking what was wrong, he was told to come and have a chat with her. She then asked if he wanted to live with her for a long time. Turan answered that he did. She made him promise to never use this power from now on, insisting that he must never use it in front of other people. She asked if he remembered the story about the noble and the knight. Confirming his memory, he listened as she explained that magic users are called wizards regardless of their status. She noted that nobles and knights are fundamentally different. Nobles are descendants of divine beings called the Freyans who came to save humanity, while knights are descendants of nobles mixed with humans. The boy confirmed his understanding. She clarified that this is why they differentiate between ranks even among wizards. Explaining that he inherited power from his knight father, she warned of evil nobles who treat knights like slaves. She told him to remember that nobody can know he is a wizard. 8 years have passed since that day. Turan has continued to uphold that promise to his mother. He declares that the promise will not be broken. He has no desire to reveal himself as a wizard or to descend the mountain. Suddenly, someone pounds on his door and yells for him to come out. Turan opens the door and goes out to meet them. He yawns and asks if they are claiming that he killed Rabbis. The villagers grab him by the collar and shout that he is shameless. They accuse him of hurting Rabbis and throwing him out to be eaten by monsters. He silently considers why they want to frame him. He notes that the oldest man in the village died alone, instead of the young men who were too scared to fight. He realizes they think this is the best way to shift the blame from themselves to him. A villager tries to punch him, but Turan dodges and thinks that magic is convenient. Headbutting the man, he reflects that a strong wish happens at the cost of mana, and as another villager charges, he whispers for him to fall over. As the man falls to the ground, Turan notes that he does not need to start a fire. He just uses his power a little bit so that it is not obvious, just enough so that they do not die. He declares that he will dominate them. The fight continues as everyone charges at him, but after some time, all of the men are defeated and lying on the ground. For 8 years, Turan has hidden the fact that he is a wizard. He tells the men they should have used that strength for the funeral of Rabbis. Asking the nearby women if they are here to fight too, they reply that they only came to see him. He tells them to take those idiots down with them. Inside his home, he reflects that it is going to be chaos in the town again. He suspects they will use this as an excuse to rip him off when he goes to trade. He decides he can simply beat them up until he gets a fair deal. He thinks he gave them a proper whooping and they should not be back. Loud knocking begins again and he calls them insane. He throws open the door and asks who it is. He finds a tall man standing there. The man apologizes and says he thought he could ask for a favor in his travels, wondering if he has disturbed him. Turan wonders if he is a traveler. He apologizes and notes that a few uninvited guests just came by moments ago. Reflecting that his mother taught him manners, he wonders if that was proper, feeling awkward since he never talked nicely to people in this town. He observes a traveler with a sword in this sleepy old town. He tells the man that if he is looking for an inn, he should look elsewhere, but the traveler's stomach rumbles loudly. Turan sighs and tells him to come in. He prepares a meal and explains that he is not well off, so they do not have much. The man calls it a feast and notes that Turan must have never met someone from outside the town. Turan says that is right. He explains he was born and raised on this hill and has lived as a shepherd all this time. He notes that it is rare for this small town to get tourists. The man looks at him and finds it interesting. Commenting that for someone who grew up as a shepherd, he is well versed in manners, the man assumes his parents taught him well. Turan explains he learned from his mother, but she died a few years ago due to an illness. The man says she raised a proud son and is surely among the gods in a palace in the heavens. He thanks the boy once again, while Turan says he just lives the way his mother taught him. He asks what brings the man all the way out here to this country town, and the man explains he was asked a favor. Turan asks what kind of favor, so the traveler says they were looking for someone to take care of a monster puma. He declares that he is a wizard. Turan realizes he must be the wizard the village elder talked about, and the man says that is right. He asks if he can ask a question now, and Turan says sure. The man explains that he senses a monster in this area, but he does not see one. He finds it weird that Turan knows about the elder and the monster yet remains calm. Nodding that if the monster went for a human, it would be him, he asks if Turan is scared. He remarks that Turan seems awfully brave for a shepherd. He asks Turan who he really is. Turan remembers asking his mother why nobody can know he is a wizard. She explained it is because of the bad nobles. Comparing nobles to shepherds and knights to the dogs that nobles keep, she warned that they might treat him with love, but they can sell him off or sacrifice him. She told him she does not want that kind of life for him and asked if he wanted to keep living with her, to which he said yes. She told him to remember that nobody can know he is a wizard and warned that if other wizards find out, they will separate them. And they would turn him into their shepherd dog to be discarded at any moment. She told him that to avoid being found out as a wizard, he might eventually have to kill people. Turan thinks to himself that this must be what the situation has come to, while the older man asks if he is unable to respond to the inquiry. Kjorn stares at him for a moment before declaring that making such a face simply makes his joke feel awkward, and then he lets out a nervous laugh. Turan realizes it was only a joke and apologizes for lacking a sense of humor, while Kjorn insists he is the one who should apologize as he realizes he must have flustered the young man. He reflects that it is his first time hearing a wizard joke, which is why it caught him off guard, while the wanderer remarks that the reaction was so entertaining that he took the teasing a bit too far. He notes they haven't introduced themselves properly and expresses that it is nice to meet him. The old man reveals that his name is Kjorn and describes himself as a wanderer. Turan feels he should have introduced himself first and identifies as a shepherd. He states that he is 18 years old this year, to which Kjorn responds that he will be 75. Turan thinks Kjorn looks very good for his age, nodding he doesn't look old at all, while Kjorn explains that wizards age much more slowly than ordinary people and enjoy significantly longer lives. Turan asks how he ended up becoming a wanderer in the first place, and the man explains that after serving the Arabian family for 60 years, he finally left. He says that in his later years, he desired to roam from place to place without the need to settle down, and Turan calls the idea romantic as the two of them continue their harmless conversation. Turan reflects that sharing a conversation with a good person like this is something he never realized would be so enjoyable. They continue chatting until the sun begins to rise over the horizon. Kjorn realizes he didn't notice how much time he was spending as the light grows. He hands over a coin of Arabian silver, explaining that it is the purest of silver coins and worth more than the meal. Turan accepts the payment gratefully and wishes the man a smooth hunt, while Kjorn tells him to stop acting like they will never see each other again. He suggests he might come by a few more times to mooch off him before he eventually heads out. Later in the day, Turan walks out to the field when it is time for the sheep to graze. He commands the animals to gather, causing them to look at him and begin walking his way. He reflects on the fact that this was the first time he has ever met another wizard, and wonders how long it has been since he shared a conversation that felt so naturally comfortable. Turan notes the ease and humor that naturally seeped into the man's speech was more than any adult he's ever met. He considers him a truly good person, recalling that the man even returned with a wolf. Turan had always thought knights were just emotionless hunting dogs used by arrogant nobles. He wonders how he is supposed to tell the man that there are no more monsters on Hisaril Hill. Meanwhile, Kjorn walks through the forest and notes that the surroundings feel strange. He sees traces of a battle but notes that he cannot feel a monster's presence anywhere. He looks up and discovers the rock from the sling embedded deep in a tree, wondering if the monster was already hunted and who in the world could have done it. He considers if the village chief hired another wizard, but he feels relieved that someone made things safe. Suddenly, he senses something and turns around to see the monster walking toward him with its face ripped apart. It releases a blood-curdling howl as Kjorn identifies it as a monster's wraith. He wonders who would do something like this as the monster attacks him, and he leaps backward to avoid the strike. He knows that failing to absorb or disperse mana from a dead monster's corpse turns it into a wraith, and he notes that a wizard who hunts monsters would certainly know this fundamental fact. Leaping high into the air, he concludes that the person who killed the beast was definitely a wizard, and he asks why they would leave it to become a wraith or if they were simply ignorant of the outcome. He reasons that a novice knight who doesn't know the basics could never have killed a monster like this. He wonders if they had some other intention, but decides that either way, he must destroy it. Drawing back a bow made of sheer lightning, he launches a magical arrow forward. The magic simply disperses as soon as it comes into contact with the monster's body. Kjorn asks if the monster's mana is vastly stronger than his. Suddenly, the monster disappears into the ground. He wonders if it is trying to counter magic with magic and wonders where it has gone. The creature begins to appear from his own shadow and looms over him. It swings down and strikes his arm, causing blood to fly from the impact. Kjorn realizes this is not a level a mere knight can contend with in battle, nodding that one would need to be at least a lower-ranked noble to have any chance. The monster sends Kjorn backward as he reflects on running into a wraith of this caliber in a remote village, and he thinks that you really never know what life will throw at you. The beast continues to change its shape into an even more grotesque and horrific form. Kjorn believes this is as far as he goes but refuses to die obediently. He vows that even if he dies, he will take the monster down with him. He plans to concentrate all of his mana into his hand for a final effort and stab the creature directly the moment it lunges at him. As the monster and Kjorn charge at each other, something shining comes flying out of the jungle. It was a rock that hit the monster hard. Kjorn is baffled as he watches the creature fall on the ground. Tyran approaches and asks if Kjorn is all right. Kjorn remarks that the shepherd's joke is quite startling too, but he is just surprised to see him. He realizes the boy is a wizard and asks why he didn't tell him the truth. Tyran remains silent, so Kjorn decides to change the question and asks why he helped him, nodding that the boy could have just walked away and let him die. Tyran says it is simple as he recalls the night Kjorn brought him a dead wolf. He remembers asking why the man went so far for a simple favor, while Kjorn wonders what he is talking about as Tyran continues. He notes that with his skills, the man could earn a lot more money more comfortably. Kjorn calls the villagers pitiful people, and Tyran asks in what way he means that. He describes them living on the frontier and trembling in fear without basic protection, while Tyran argues that it isn't the man's fault, but Kjorn explains a wizard inherits the power of a god, so they should live with pride by protecting powerless commoners. He admits that not every wizard thinks this way as everyone has their own way of living. Tyran smiles and tells him exactly that while the monster rises for another attack. Kjorn tells him to listen carefully because this is not a level they can handle. He warns it is a monster they cannot fight unless they are at least a noble, and he tells Tyran to inform the village chief immediately and help everyone evacuate. He vows to hold the monster off here. Kjorn admits he talked big but doesn't know how long he can actually last. But Tyran tells him that it is okay as Kjorn asks what he is saying. Tyran tells him if the attack he just used managed to land, then everything is going to be okay, while Kjorn asks what he is talking about, wondering if that attack wasn't his full strength, and he thinks a young knight hiding in the mountains couldn't hunt a wraith that even nobles deal with. That's what Kjorn thought at first, but he realizes what he is seeing isn't just a small connection made in a rural village, nor is it the reckless bravado of a young knight who ran from nobles. The scene before his eyes could be the beginning of a wizard who will turn the world upside down. Tyran declares that he was also curious about what his limits truly are. As Tyran stands before the monster, he declares that he wants to test his limits. Kjorn announces he will not permit the boy to face this alone, warning that despite his remarkable talent, this opponent is too formidable for them not to join forces. As the monster attempts to strike him, a sudden attack sends it flying. Kjorn realizes he would only be an obstruction since he could not even react to that previous attack. He acknowledges that at this moment, he provides no assistance to his companion. He decides that his current role is to help the young shepherd's talent truly bloom. Meanwhile, Tyran stands firm while launching a continuous series of attacks at the beast. However, he realizes the situation is not as favorable as it seems because his physical strikes are taking no effect. Kjorn shouts that it is impossible to kill a wraith with physical attacks alone. Tyran asks how he is supposed to slay the creature then, and Kjorn instructs him to use fire or lightning. The boy's eyes begin to shine as fire appears, yet it simply bounces off the monster, leading him to observe that it is not working. Kjorn is shocked to see that Tyran doesn't understand that establishing proper causality is a basic requirement for applying magic to another living being, wondering if the boy lacks fundamental common sense. He realizes now that Tyran was the one who killed the original monster and allowed it to become a wraith. This leads him to the conclusion that Tyran has never actually absorbed mana in his entire life. He tells Tyran not to simply light a fire but to create the flame and then shoot it at the target, yet he remains stunned by just how strong the boy is already. Tyran catches his balance and begins to imbue the fire into his hand. Kjorn reflects that while making fire isn't difficult for a wizard, controlling it requires separate training. Turan performs the task instantly, creating a powerful fire. He steps forward before hurling the flames at the monster. The flame explodes upon impact, causing the monster to scream as it burns alive. Kyorn urges him to keep his mind focused on the spell, explaining that he must keep pouring mana into it so the fire does not go out. He insists that everything about the wraith must be burned away as Turan continues to imbue his mana into the attack. His eyes shine like a rainbow as the flames grow more violent. Kyorn cannot believe they actually won and reflects on how absurdly strong that wraith was, nodding that one would need at least noble class power to fight it, yet Turan took it down. Turan asks if the battle is finally over, while Kyorn remains in disbelief that a shepherd from the mountains achieved such a feat. Kyorn warns that if he does not want to encounter another wraith, he must absorb the mana first, and when Turan asks how to do that, he tells him to imagine draining something into himself. Turan agrees and places his hand on the remains. As he focuses, a green aura emanates from the monster and gathers into his palm. As he does this, all of the mana is absorbed and circulates throughout his entire body. As he starts to shiver, Kyorn mentions he will experience a certain kind of pleasure. He declares he cannot believe it even after seeing it with his own eyes and asks if this truly was his first time absorbing mana, and Turan confirms that it was. Kyorn explains that after an initial awakening, mana grows slowly with age, and the most effective way to grow is to kill monsters or wizards and absorb their mana. Since this was Turan's first time, his innate potential must be in a different league entirely. He concludes that this young man must belong to a noble house. Kyorn bows and apologizes for his previous rudeness, then asks which noble house Turan belongs to, but Turan tells him to wipe the blood off himself first. Back inside the house, Kyorn has his arm covered in bandages. He once again apologizes for his lack of manners toward the boy, feeling he can only apologize for making someone as esteemed as Turan perform such a task. Turan reminds him he has already stated he is not someone esteemed, explaining he is just a shepherd who does not even know who his father is. He glares and tells him to stop the formalities, while Kyorn agrees and tells Turan not to glare at him. But the man wonders why a powerful wizard would choose to be a shepherd, explaining he does not mean to belittle him, but the role simply does not seem to suit him. Turan reveals it was his mother's request which she held onto until the moment she died, and Kyorn asks for more explanation. And Turan describes how nobles live below the mountains. He explains that if his wizard identity is revealed, he will only be used by them and then thrown away, while Kyorn observes his mother was very wise. Turan is surprised since he expected him to call it overprotective parenting. Kyorn tells him his mother was not entirely wrong. He reflects that wizards have great power and that great power inevitably brings conflict, recalling a major war between noble houses just 20-some years ago. He explains it was a conflict between the House of Arabian which he served and the Great House of Zahar, noting that so many people died in that war. Out of roughly 3,000 Arabian knights at the time, more than 900 died. He reflects that nearly a third of them were lost. Sadly, he realizes everyone close to him was in that third, remembering his friend Denver, his teacher Hartman, and his beloved wife and son, who were all massacred by House Zahar. He concludes that his mother was right to an extent, as a knight's life can vanish more easily and meaninglessly than a commoner's. However, he points out that the one thing she was wrong about was Turan's aptitude. He admits it is embarrassing to say while in his current state, but he is a knight with fairly good skill, yet Turan easily destroyed a monster wraith that he himself could not bring down. He tells the boy his potential is not merely that of a knight but is at minimum noble level, and even among them he possesses at least upper-tier aptitude. Turan asks if his mother was lying when she said his father was a knight, while Kyorn explains that on rare occasions, a child worse than a knight is born among nobles, or a noble-class child is born among knights. In that sense, he suggests it would be better for Turan to leave this hill and enter the world. Turan asks why he should do that, and Kyorn explains that humanity desperately needs more strong and kind nobles and knights, because humans are still not the complete masters of the world. Long ago, other races pushed out by the gods were left watching for a chance to rise again. In the midst of this, nobles only continue to wage war against one another. He argues this is an age that desperately needs someone strong and kind like Turan. More than anything, he asks if Turan is truly satisfied living as a shepherd. Turan looks at him and asks what he could even gain by going below the mountain. Kyorn explains that it depends on his desires, whether it be wealth, fame, authority, family, or friendship, noting that any of that is hard to obtain here. He tells him to try imagining the possibilities where he could wander as a wanderer and destroy monsters, or become an explorer in the unknown, or be adopted into a house to walk the path of power. Turan admits that listening to him, he thinks the man is right. He notes it would be more interesting than herding sheep here. For the first time, he is seriously curious about the world outside. Kyorn worries he might be planting expectations for no reason, but promises to support every possibility Turan has. Then he asks about his bloodline ability, and Turan asks what he means. Kyorn apologizes and explains he keeps forgetting the boy knows little about magic. He explains a bloodline ability is a trait nobles inherit from their ancestor, the Freyans, and whether or not one has this ability is what separates nobles from knights. He asks if any spell felt unusually easy, or if he has some outstanding ability that does not require magic. Turan wonders if it is because he is strong, but Kyorn explains that simply having mana makes a wizard's physical abilities stronger. Turan mentions he has a good nose and is pretty good at throwing stones, while Kyorn says that if his sense of smell is exceptional, it can be considered a bloodline ability. Kyorn notes that being skilled with thrown weapons is a trait of House Arabian, though it is a fairly common one. He tells Turan to continue explaining. After some time, Kyorn declares that he thinks he knows which house his abilities are closest to. Turan asks for the house's name. Kyorn's expression changes as he tells him the name of a great house known as Pursuers or Hunters. He reveals it is House Zahar, the very one that fought the war against House Arabian. Turan is visibly surprised by this. As Turan hears the name House Zahar, he becomes visibly worried. He looks at Kyorn with a sad expression since he shares a bloodline with the man's enemies. He considers the idea of apologizing, but notes that these relatives are practically strangers he has never encountered. Kyorn tells him not to maintain such a worried expression, noting that Turan did not participate in that war, and declaring that it is a situation for adults. He says that the fighting will never cease if they attempt to wash blood with blood. Turan asks if he possesses any regrets, causing Kyorn to inquire what he is referring to. The shepherd explains he is talking about the suggestion to descend the hill. Kyorn tells him that pursuing power after leaving the mountain will inevitably lead him to join House Zahar, noting that the young man has outstanding abilities, but declaring that he trusts his character. Turan asks what he means by that, so the man explains he is referring to the goodness within him, pointing out that he saved him while revealing an identity he has hidden for his entire life, and considering the idea that if someone like him joined House Zahar and achieved a high position, perhaps it could stop such a terrible war from occurring again. Kyorn says there is no need to think about the matter too seriously. He reflects that a decision regarding joining the family has not been made yet. Turan announces that his thoughts are now clear and he wants to try descending the mountain. Kyorn tells him he has thought well, but the boy declares he does not want to depart immediately. He tells Kyorn that he will head down once the man's injury has healed, while Kyorn calls him kind, nodding he is only slightly scratched and reflecting that the boy is truly a good person. Later inside the house, Kyorn explains that mana is absolutely required to use magic, stating that this is why mana is commonly referred to as the key to omnipotence. Turan asks about the term, so Kyorn clarifies it is not a truly omnipotent power despite the name, and that using magic requires mana that matches it. The boy asks what the standard for matching mana is, so Kyorn declares he will explain that immediately. He says the difficulty of magic is largely determined by 3 factors, listing them as bloodline, affinity, and causality. He explains that bloodline is determined by the specific lineage one is born into, which applies to most nobles who are not knights. He considers that it would be difficult for the boy to heal wounds using magic, asking if he is wrong about that, but Turan declares that he is not. Kyorn continues that for members of the Ravista bloodline from the south, it is something they can achieve even without training since the power originates from the bloodline. Turan asks about the second factor, affinity, which Kyorn says can be thought of as familiarity. He explains it is the concept that a mage can more easily perform tasks they prefer or are used to, while Turan reflects that it is like how he created a fireball as if he were throwing a rock. Kyorn confirms that he is correct and considers that simply making flames would not have achieved the same speed or firepower. He notes the last factor, causality, is the most important, though he reflects he does not fully understand it. He asks what would occur if Turan tried to kill him directly by using mana, so Turan says some light would probably shine from his head and nothing more would happen. Kyorn says that is exactly the phenomenon occurring from a lack of causality. He explains it applies when there is no appropriate cause for a desired outcome or when what needs to be achieved is excessively difficult. Turan reflects that he thinks he understands a bit of what causality is. He notes that to kill Kyorn, instead of spending mana wishing for death, he would need to provide a cause of death like creating and shooting flames, which is more natural than directly lighting one. Kyorn tells him exactly that while reflecting Turan could have been a scholar instead of a mage. Turan says that he can control ordinary animals as he wishes and asks why magical beasts would need something like that, so Kyorn tells him it is because of their mana. They continue talking while a sheep eavesdrops. Turan reflects that magic is certainly not easy, while Kjorn tells him an excellent mage knows not just how to use mana, but also the principles and situations behind it. The shepherd wonders if the House Zahar bloodline also possesses special magic, so Kjorn tells him they are skilled in stealth and tracking and suggests he try it once. Turan agrees to the suggestion. He closes his eyes and thinks how he does not want to be seen by others, wishing that neither sound nor smell could be detected. He starts to fade away and asks if it worked. Kjorn stands there speechless, seeing nothing in front of him. He tells him he succeeded because he can no longer see him. The man feels a little sad as he looks at the now empty room. Turan slowly reappears, and Kjorn reflects it has been a while since he has seen that ability, nodding it is still a frightening power. He notes that during the war, the Arabian knights feared that ability the most, while Turan reflects that this seems like an unfairly powerful ability. Kjorn tells him it is not invincible and declares he will teach him magic training methods. Turan says the man is being too friendly and teaching too much to a mage from an enemy family. Kjorn reminds him he saved his life and treated him, declaring again that he trusts his character. Later, an ugly bald man asks if Turan is truly selling the sheep and leaving. The bald man asks who will perform the shepherding from now on, and how he can decide such a thing without consulting them. Turan tells them they should figure out how to find a shepherd themselves, declaring it does not matter to them what he does with his belongings. He hopes they buy the sheep at a fair price or he will release them and leave. He says they are free to capture them but notes they will probably have a hard time. The chief reflects that this bastard is someone who keeps his word and that nothing good will come from irritating him. He says he understands and tells him to do whatever he wants while handing over a bag of money. As Turan and Kjorn start to leave, Turan reflects that the villagers still owe Kjorn compensation for everything and considers going to collect it. Kjorn tells him he does not intend to receive it because Turan was the one who caught the beast. Turan notes that is true and reflects they have reached a crossroads where they must part ways. Kjorn tells him he is sorry for refusing the offer to travel together as he is more comfortable alone. The boy declares he understands and thanks him for everything. Kjorn tells him to take care, and Turan declares he hopes they meet again with smiling faces. He watches the knight's retreating figure for a long time. Only later does he realize why he did not want the man to speak formally. He reflects that although he never lacked affection from his mother, he had been secretly yearning for a father figure. He realizes he wanted someone who could be a role model for what kind of man he should become. The journey continues as Turan travels deep into the desert and past a canyon. As he walks and looks up to try to look farther, he spots people off in the distance. He wonders if they are traveling merchants going from village to village. He reflects this is good since he can ask for directions. Turan reaches near them. A man asks who he is to block their path, so Turan explains he is traveling alone and asks for the location of the nearest city. They tell him he will reach a city called Mure if he follows the road they came from. Turan thanks them for the information and starts to leave, but one of the men tells him to wait. He asks if the boy is really going to leave after receiving information, while Turan asks what he is talking about and wonders what he wants. The man tells him he should give something in return if he receives something. They take out their blades and tell him to take off his bag. Turan asks if they are bandits and the man asks what he will do if they are. The man who gave the directions declares this is just recklessness, nodding this is a wasteland where no one would find it strange if someone died. He points his sword at Turan and tells him to take off his bag and cloak while they are being nice, because killing and stripping him would be unnecessarily bloody. Turan understands and notes they are bandits who kill people. He remembers his training with Kjorn, practicing magic with him and remembering everything the man told him. Recalling Kjorn, Turan declares he will use them for practice. The group begins to laugh at him, declaring that he is talking like some kind of wizard. Turan moves his hand forward, sending the men flying through the air with a gust of wind. He notes that instead of generating wind from thin air, shaping it with his hand, and amplifying it uses much less mana. He didn't realize he could whip up wind this strong with such a small amount of mana, and the men are left completely confused by the attack. He then begins to pull water from his water pouch, forming it into a crystal. He creates multiple crystals now and the bandits realize they have made a mistake. One of the men is impaled by crystals, which kills him instantly. Turan thinks that this spell is supposed to be useful near a lot of water, but considers that simply throwing stones feels faster and stronger than this so far. The bandits apologize and say they didn't know he was a wizard while begging for forgiveness. The leader is distracting him while the rest of the group creeps up from behind. Turan lifts his foot and stomps down, causing a sand pillar to spawn under the men, and the pillars impale all of them as the leader stands there speechless. He stares at the corpses of his men and declares that this is impossible. Turan says he has one thing to ask, and the man declares he will answer anything. He asks why they attacked him without a plan, noting that a traveler walking alone could easily be a wizard. The leader explains it was because Turan bowed his head. He says that even when they spoke rudely, the boy bowed and greeted them, so they assumed he was ordinary. Turan thanks him and declares that the man taught him something useful. The bandit smiles and asks if he is really going to spare him. Water begins to gather above the man's head, as a flashback shows Kjorn telling him that he is going to meet many people, and there is something he must absolutely know. He says he must never show mercy to scum like bandits, describing them as the kind who do not hesitate to harm others for a profit. He notes the reason he is saying this so firmly is because he understands the boy's nature, and Turan declares that he understands the reasoning. A life spared out of pity could end up harming 10 good people, so he kills the man and reflects that he has stalled for long enough. The road the bandits drag their cart along left clear wheel tracks cutting across the sand for him to follow. As he follows the trail, one thought remains burned sharply into his mind. He killed people. He feels guilt but realizes he couldn't just let them go. Kjorn's warning comes back to remind him of those who rob and kill without hesitation, and such people would target others again at any moment. Like tracks in the desert slowly fatting as weeds grow over them, Turan's chaotic heart gradually settled as he recalled the teachings of Kjorn. And then, he arrived in a new world. He stands above the small city of Mure, which is unlike the village where he spent his life. He thinks that the place is pretty, and as the streets are crowded with people, he notes it is his first time seeing so many together. Even the architecture is completely different from what he is used to. He feels as though he has truly come to a city. He walks toward a shopkeeper who welcomes him and asks what he can get for him. Turan says he is not a customer. He recalls Kjorn saying that if he reaches a city and needs a place to rest, he should look for an inn. The shopkeeper tells him that if he is not buying fruit, he should get lost. Turan wonders why the man is being so rude, and if it is an unspoken rule in cities that questions require buying fruit first. He points to a fruit and asks how much it costs, so the merchant tells him it is 2 ducat. Turan asks what exactly a ducat is, but the merchant notes he looks like an outsider who probably doesn't know what that is, adding that paying with other coins is fine too. Turan hands over a coin and asks where he can find the inn. The man points him toward the biggest inn in the city. When he arrives, an inn staff member named Lena welcomes him. She tells him that he is a handsome guest, and he asks how much a night costs, and she says it is 16 ducat. He declares that he will stay but adds that he has one more question. He asks if there is a monster nearby with a bounty on its head, but Lena is surprised that he is asking about a monster. He thinks about needing to kill monsters to absorb their mana, and recalls Kjorn saying that hunting monsters would earn money as well. He asks why she is not answering his question. Lena declares that there is no such thing as free in this world. She eventually has him buy a drink and tells him to go to City Hall. He asks what that place is. She asks if he really doesn't know and declares he must be from the countryside. She explains that city halls are where various public affairs are handled, and the officials working there are employed by the city's lord. She adds it is probably closed since the sun is already down, but suggests going there tomorrow if he wants to find a monster bounty. She asks if he is a monster hunter as well, so Turan asks what a monster hunter is. She explains people claim that if an ordinary person hunts monsters, they become a wizard, and she asks if he is trying to become a wizard too. She declares that anyone who believes that kind of superstition is an idiot, but Turan asks if it is just a superstition. Suddenly someone puts his hand on Turan, and it was a monster hunter named Midden who declares it is a fact that killing monsters makes you a wizard, saying he saw it with his own eyes. Lena is surprised to see him alive, but Midden declares he is not dying until he becomes a wizard. Turan pats the man's hand, and Midden removes it from his shoulder while apologizing for the intrusion. Turan says he wants to hear more about what was just said, and Midden asks if he refers to the part about becoming a wizard by killing monsters. He explains that wizards get stronger when they hunt monsters, and by the same principle an ordinary person can become a wizard. He notes the 4 of them are hunting monsters to try and become wizards. Turan asks if that means someone among them is already a wizard, but Midden says no and explains there is only the Lord's wizard and 3 others under him in this city. He notes the boy's gear is too shabby for hunting and asks if he has a weapon. Turan says he does and holds up a sling, while Midden notes that judging by how worn it is, he must have used it a lot. Turan says it is good for firing something the size of an egg quickly, but Midden says he could easily hunt rabbit or fox monsters with that. He notes they were wishing for one more shooter and asks if he has any interest in hunting with them. Turan smiles and says no but thanks them for the offer. At night in his room, he reflects that there is no reason he has to hunt together with them. He thinks about what a chaotic day it has been. He still can't believe he actually left the village, wondering what is going to happen from here on. He senses someone outside his room and asks who it is. He recalls Kjorn telling him that a city isn't automatically safe and he should never let his guard down. He goes near the door while imbuing his hand with mana just in case. He cracks the door open and asks Lena what she is doing there. She asks if he was asleep and says she thought the room might be cold, so she came to keep him warm. He asks what she means by that. And Lena smiles and begins to undress herself. She tells him that it's exactly what it sounds like. The boy is confused and asks what she means by exactly what it sounds like. She explains that for a small amount of money she will do whatever he desires, but he asks what she will do if there is nothing he wants. And she tells him not to lie, claiming she can tell just by looking at his face. But Turan turns into the Buddha himself and Lena stares at him. He recalls Kjorn getting mad and saying that he must never fall for the honeypot. The man had warned he always has to be careful with women at inns and prostitutes in general, since most of them carry sexually transmitted diseases. He noted that while they have strong disease resistance, and it is no problem for them, if Turan is careless, he could pass it on when he is with another woman, advising that he shouldn't let desire trap him into doing something he will regret. Turan thinks that cities are not easy to live in either, and reflects on the fruit shop earlier and now Lena too. He considers how they put a price on even small bits of information and conversation, and concludes that cities really are pretty cold-hearted. He then overhears Midden and his men discussing something. They ask Midden why he was trying to bring that guy from earlier along, as one of the men noted that he didn't look like he would be much help. The other dude said that was right, and that he just sounded so cocky he would be perfect to use as bait, but Midden explains it is because Turan reminds him of himself when he was young. He figured that if the boy was at least next to him, he might as well survive a little longer, while the others tell him that he is way too good-hearted. Hearing this, Turan smiles, thinking maybe the city isn't completely cold after all. The next day he heads to City Hall and a man asks if he can help him. Turan asks if he is an official and the man asks what else he would look like. The young shepherd tells him he came to hunt monsters, which confuses the man. He recalls Kjorn telling him previously that the world would not be kind to him. He thinks about it the other way around, nodding there's no reason it has to be kind, and he was advised that if he wants people to treat him kindly, the method is simple. He must reveal that he is a wizard and ordinary people will bow their heads. The official hands him a paper and says that he cannot take it with him. He instructs him to look and then hand it back. Turan asks if it is a crow monster and the man asks if it looks like a cat or something. He explains that it is unlikely, but if he kills a monster, he has to bring it to the city, nodding a wizard is needed to disperse the mana so it does not become a wraith. He warns that if he kills a monster and leaves it abandoned, the penalty under city law is execution. Turan knows this and understands what happens when a monster becomes a wraith, and he cannot repeat the same mistake. Turan then asks if knights don't hunt monsters, but the official says they are not people with time to spare. He explains a knight's job is to maintain public order in the city. He notes that hunting monsters outside the city is something for thugs like him to handle, and as Turan leaves, the official comments that another corpse is going to pile up outside the city. But later, he comes with a dead monster with a giant hole in its chest. Everybody is surprised, unable to believe what they are seeing. They ask him how he managed to bring it back so fast and if he killed it alone. Turan says that he did and asks if he can receive the reward for killing it. The official says they will give it to him and runs to get Turan's reward. He hands over a bag and tells him to go get some rest. The other officials talk about how incredible it is because even its wings are still intact, and they wonder if it is possible to bring back a blade crow in this condition. The official thinks about it and looks over, asking Turan why he is still here. Turan asks if there are any other monsters worth hunting. They ask if he is really planning to go hunt more. Later, Lena tells him that these are the most expensive items on their menu. She never dreamed that someone like him could defeat 30 monsters in just 3 days. She says he must have made a lot of money from the bounties, while Turan continues to eat like a baby. He responds that money isn't his only goal. More precisely, the goal is the monster's mana, and thanks to that, he has definitely gotten stronger. He notes that compared to when he met Kjorn, his mana has increased severalfold. However, he can feel a limit approaching, and with only weak monsters' mana, it is going to be hard to get any stronger. He then tells Lena that he has a question for her, and she asks what it is, and he asks if she took a bite of this, but she reminds him that he ate it all by himself. She notes that even though he is skinny, he can definitely eat, and the chef says he made it for the first time in a while and is happy he enjoyed it. Turan says it was delicious, and as he stands up to leave, one of Midden's men grabs him by the coat. He asks if he is really eating something so tasty by himself. They make fun of him, saying they have heard that he has made a lot of money and suggesting he should give some charity to his partners. Turan hits him in the face, and the man stumbles backward. Turan asks if he wanted some more charity. Another man gets pissed and swings at him, but Turan dodges and hits him in the face too, while one runs at him carrying a chair and swings, but Turan blocks it. Turan raises his hand and flicks the man in the forehead. Lena gets nervous and yells, telling them to stop fighting in the inn. Later, Midden apologizes and says he gave them a proper scolding. He promises this will never happen again and explains they have been tight on money lately. He says they just got jealous when they saw him and tells the other two to apologize. And they both say sorry. Turan asks if things are that hard for them and Midden says they have just been limited. He doesn't think they will be able to pay the room fee but notes that it is their problem. Turan then takes out a bag of money and tells him to take it. Midden asks why, and Turan explains this is repayment for the kindness he showed before, remembering him saying he was worried and tried to bring him along. Midden asks how he knew about that, while Turan says there is no such thing as free and he needs some information in return. Midden laughs and says that information is what he is best at, and he will tell Turan everything he knows. Later, outside the town, Turan looks at it and reflects this might be his last hunt in this city. He notes Midden gave him information about the next one, so it is about time he left for there. He reflects there was a lot more useful information than he expected and that Midden is a great person. He thinks Midden is not as seasoned as Kjorn, but that just makes him purer and kinder. He then senses something and recognizes the smell. He starts to run in that direction, knowing what is happening but hopping his hunch is wrong. As he heads into the jungle, he sees marks on a tree. He looks over and spots one of the men cut across the chest and bleeding out. Turan recognizes that he is from Midden's group. He then looks over and spots Midden's corpse and the coins that he gave him on the ground covered in blood. Turan just wonders what happened to him. Turan looks down at Midden and one of the men who is still barely alive as the man struggles to speak but manages to get the word rabbit out. Turan is confused and asks a rabbit. But the dying man is finally able to say it's a rabbit monster. Turan looks to the other side and sees the monster still eating another man. The monster also notices him and glares at Turan with its red glowing eyes. Turan was standing up when the monster charged at him with great speed, but he dodged the attack, and the monster hit the tree, destroying it instantly. Turan can't believe how fast it is and he was almost hit by it. He twirls his sling and raises it up before firing it. As the rock soars through the air, it splits into three and all of them move toward the monster, but the monster easily destroys all of them. Turan notes that this creature is used to defending against thrown weapon techniques. The beast readies itself and dashes toward him once more. It is surprised when Turan completely vanishes in front of it. The monster stops the attack as it can't see Turan, but he suddenly appears behind it with a dagger in his hand and stabs the rabbit monster in the neck. Turan retreats and starts turning invisible using magic. The monster tries to attack at that moment, but Turan had already become invisible, and the monster was only able to cut down a tree. The rabbit monster becomes mad and starts cutting every tree he can see. After some time, it comes to a stop as it becomes exhausted and screams loudly. As the monster loses more blood, it finally dies and falls on the ground, as Turan was able to successfully rage-bait it to death. He then undoes his invisibility and approaches the monster's corpse. He stretches his hand out toward the beast and begins to absorb its mana. He notices that the amount of mana he is getting now is different, reflecting that it is more than the leopard monster he encountered the first time. The man who is still barely alive can't believe that Turan is a wizard. Turan confirms that he is, and the man asks why he is hiding his identity. But Turan asks if any of the four of them have belongings he can pass on to their families, and the guy begins crying, saying that he doesn't have a family as he looks at Midden full of regret. Turan remembers Midden telling him about a great city nearby called Orem, which has a place called a library. Turan asks what a library is, and Midden explains it has thousands of books. He then tells Turan that at the moment he said the word books, he looked fully interested, so Turan asks if he really did, and Midden explains that he heard not just anyone can enter the library. Turan asks how he is meant to get in then, and Midden tells him that apparently only wizards are allowed inside. Turan says he understands and that he has decided. Midden asks what he is talking about, and Turan declares he is going to that great city he mentioned. Now Turan stands over their graves after having buried them. He wishes them happiness there and walks away. Sometime later, Turan is standing in line. He is almost embarrassed that he was shocked by the small city of Mure. Now that he is standing before the great city Orem, he can tell how big of a city this is based on the scale alone. He did not think that there would be this many people trying to enter the city. He sees the guards and wonders if they are scanning for criminals. As expected of a great city, it has a more established system. The guards tell him to stop, and Turan asks what is wrong. They inform him that he cannot be allowed to enter because his clothes are absolutely filthy, telling him he should dust himself off at least. Later, he gets into the city and stands before a massive tower. He reflects that this must be the library that Midden talked about. He thinks it is overwhelming and must have been built with magic. He walks up to the entrance and says that he is trying to enter, The guards tell him that only wizards are allowed to enter. He tells them that he is a wizard, but one of the guards gets pissed, asking if the boy wants to die for impersonating a wizard. He declares there is no way a kid like him could be a wizard. But the guard tries to imbue his hand with mana as Turan recalls Kjorn's words, who had told him that wizards can recognize each other by sensing the other's mana and can tell whether someone is stronger than them. Turan decides to use this to his advantage and releases a massive amount of mana. The guard gets scared from sensing the power and falls onto the floor. He realizes that this is no ordinary wizard and is at least of noble class or higher. He screams his name and declares he is Kenya, a knight of House Voltas, and wonders which house Turan is from. Turan asks if he has to tell him his house to enter, and the man says no. However, to use the library, he needs permission from the Master of Voltas, and when Turan asks what that means, the guard says he will contact House Voltas for him. Later, Turan is sighing as he reflects he thought it would be a simple process. However, maids are now cleaning him inside of a bathhouse, and he wonders how this even happened. He tells them to stop and asks if there is a problem with him washing himself. They explain that if they fail to properly attend to an esteemed guest, they will be punished. He tells them to do what they want and they thank him for that. Later, one of the maids says that he is amazing. She instantly realizes what she said and covers her mouth. He asks if there is something on his face. The maid says she just lost herself because of how handsome he is and begs for forgiveness. He tells her there is nothing to forgive, but the maids tell him to stop speaking so casually to them. Then someone else enters and says, "Wow, what's this?" It was a girl who says she can't believe he is the same guest who showed up looking like a beggar. She notes that after washing up and dressing, he looks like a prince, while the bodyguard with her says she shouldn't be saying that. Turan introduces himself to the girl, and she introduces herself as Azella. She asks what house he belongs to, but he says that for personal reasons it is difficult to say. She tells him that is a shame. She decides to play a prank on him for hiding who he is. She begins to release her mana, which spreads throughout the room, thinking that he needs to show her what his mana looks like. Turan feels the crushing weight of Azella's mana slamming into him with intense force. But after a moment, he also releases his own mana, their auras clashing with each other while the surroundings tremble under the pressure. A guard rushes in front of the maids, putting himself between them and the spreading pressure. After a few moments, Turan retracts his mana, and Azella stops as well, finishing her test with a surprised wow. She looks at her hands, which are now trembling, and laughs. She then looks at Turan and asks if he wants to marry her. He is completely stunned, his thoughts wiped clean for a moment. Azella notices his frozen face and teases him for reacting that way, assuring him that it was just a joke. But she looks at him one more time, urging him to think about her offer as the seat next to her is currently empty. After saying this, she and her bodyguards leave the room. Turan watches her leave for some time and then looks down to see that his own hands are also trembling. She has mana that is on par with his at the very least, leaving him to wonder if this level of strength is considered normal in this city. The scene shifts to a different room where the man Turan wanted to see is waiting. This is Rug Voltas, the Lord of Aurum, who welcomes Turan as a young noble and asks if he already knows his name. Turan introduces himself, and Rug repeats the name Turan before asking if he wants to use the library. He mentions that a lot of people come there after hearing strange rumors, so he wants to clarify in advance that there is no amazing ancient magic in the library, nor is there some secret method to increase mana. Turan states that he is fine with that, explaining that he never wanted anything of the sort. Rug studies him for a moment and then allows it, nodding that there is nothing inside that counts as confidential information related to his house anyway. Since it has gotten late, he suggests that Turan rest and come back tomorrow, asking if that is acceptable, to which Turan declares he won't forget this kindness. The next day at the entrance, the guards check Turan and confirm his entry pass, welcoming him as an esteemed guest into the Sky Library. Turan pushes the doors open and steps inside. He looks up and sees the library climbing upward in a spiral that looks like it never ends. He finally realizes what the library truly is. Then a voice comes from nearby, greeting him by name. He turns to find a young girl standing there, who introduces herself as the librarian and states that, by order of the Lord, she will explain the simple rules for using this place. Turan stares at her, surprised to see that a little kid is the librarian. She raises a finger and explains that the first rule is he must compensate them if he damages anything. The second rule is he cannot take any books out. And finally, she will be watching him the whole time he is using the library. Turan asks if she could stand a little farther away while he reads because he feels uncomfortable. He asks if, as a librarian, she has read the books there too. She says yes and tells him that if he needs something, finding it for him is what she does best. She asks what he wants to read, offering options like romance or history or even something erotic since he is young, which makes Turan just look at her in surprise. Turan declares he wants to learn basic common sense about the world, and this time it is the librarian who looks surprised. She reacts quickly, moving with surprising speed as she gathers a heavy stack of books and drops them in front of him. She notes that many of the books are hundreds of years old and won't suit his needs, but she guides him toward a section that might help a little. Turan thanks her and she tells him he is welcome. He picks up one of the books and reflects on what a book actually is. Then he opens it carefully and starts reading, his expression changing as he thinks about how amazing these books are. Turan repeats the same routine every day, reading in the library. He now comes to understand the world's geography and its different races, learning about the etiquette of wizards and how various items are manufactured and processed, even studying monsters and relics from the era of the Old Empire. With each piece of knowledge he accumulates, his world, something that was once nothing but an unknown space, grows clearer and more vivid to him. Later, Lord Rugvaltas notes that Turan has been making excellent use of the library, which Turan confirms is true. The Lord then states that, separate from treating him as a noble, allowing him to use the library was an act of goodwill, and he declares he would like to receive payment for that goodwill. Turan does not stall and asks the Lord to tell him what he needs. Rug explains that a monster has appeared north of Orem and has been attacking travelers, noting that 4 knights who went to subjugate it never returned because they were eaten. He adds that it seems a noble will have to step in personally, but his house can only mobilize 2 people at the moment. Turan agrees to help, thinking that protecting people is what a wizard ought to do. However, he feels something is off, knowing that wizards are usually the type who do not get involved in things like this. Rug adds that the Northern Road is an important trade route for Orem and has been blocked for 10 days, so they have to reopen it quickly. Turan realizes that 10 days ago was before he even arrived in Orem, figuring out that this is why the Lord let him use the library so readily. The scene shifts as a large group leaves the city. Azella remarks that her father really is something else to think he would mobilize a guest for a monster hunt, asking if they were truly that unreliable. She tells Turan that she is not blaming anyone, but says the Lord is making a huge fuss. The man beside her laughs and asks if calling the Lord fussy is a bit much, prompting Azella to tell him to drop it. That man stops for a moment and turns toward Turan to introduce himself as Marvin Valtas, saying he looks forward to working with him, and Turan returns the greeting. As they walk, Azella says they should finish this quickly and go back to rest. Marvin leans in and asks if Turan is interested in his big sister by any chance, to which Turan says no instantly. Marvin looks genuinely relieved. Suddenly, the guard at the front shouts for everyone to stop. Up ahead, they find a destroyed carriage on the road. As they inspect the wreckage, one guard asks if this was done by that creature. Another guard says it probably was, reasoning that since they forbade anyone from going north from their side, the travelers must have come from the south and gotten attacked by the monster. Turan stays quiet and studies a mark on a wooden board. He then states that the monster is a monkey. Azella repeats the word with doubt, so Turan tells them to look at a handprint and explains that the creature attacked the peddlers and went back into the forest. If they locate its trail, they should be able to find it. Azella says she can barely use tracking magic and asks Marvin if he can, but Marvin says he cannot either. Turan then steps forward, volunteering to try looking, and searches for something amidst the carriage parts. Azella asks if he is from a specific tracker bloodline, but Turan just picks up a small piece of cloth and simply says he uses this method a lot and is used to it. He closes his eyes, smells the cloth, and activates a search spell. He opens his eyes and a blue energy trail becomes visible to him. He points toward the forest and leads them that way. The trail stops at a river where Turan notes that it looks like the beast washed its body. Azella refuses to believe a mere beast did that on purpose to avoid being tracked, while Turan suggests it might have just washed because it wanted to. Suddenly, Turan sees those blue lines again and warns the group that the beast is behind them. A massive monkey monster with glowing red eyes emerges, roaring loudly. The monkey raises its hands, in which it is holding large stones. The knights see this and shout for everyone to dodge. The monster launches the stones, which are so large and fast that anyone hit by them is heavily injured. Turan barely escapes the attack, but he is more surprised by what he is seeing. Azella and Marvin do not dodge the attack but use the knights as shields, and because of that, those knights are heavily injured. After the attack stops, Azella simply throws away the knight she was holding as a shield. Turan finally understands that his mother was not wrong. Azella screams for everyone to attack. The remaining knights who can still fight run toward the monster, but the monster turns to run and the knights, seeing it flee, chase after it. Meanwhile, Turan puts a small rock into his sling. Azella and Marvin run after the monster, but it is too fast. Azella says that they are going to lose it, but as she speaks, she sees a small rock fly past her. It is so fast that she cannot even react. The rock flies past all of them and hits the monster, going straight through its body as it screams in pain. Azella and Marvin look back and see Turan walking calmly while spinning his sling. Turan looks up as the monster screams again. As the monkey monster screams and collapses on the ground, Azella quickly seizes the opportunity to finish the creature, extending her hand and using her magic as an immense torrent of fire erupts. This fire takes the form of a dragon and moves toward the monster, but the creature can only stare at the flames because it is heavily injured by Turan's attack and cannot move. As the fire hits, it creates a massive explosion, completely obliterating the monster. Turan watches the flames and realizes that he is witnessing the bloodline ability of House Volta's pyromaniacs. The knights can finally breathe in peace now that the threat is gone. Azella looks at Turan, admitting that she got chills for a second while his rock was flying toward them. Marvin asks if his sister got scared. Azella tells him to shut up and declares that he is the one who screamed like a little girl, to which Marvin asks in disbelief when he ever did such a thing. Meanwhile, the knights are busy checking the wounded. Several men have broken arms, but one veteran tells them to quit whining, pointing out that someone else had their whole arm blown off, asking if anyone has spare bandages, while another knight notes that a man's head will not stop bleeding, prompting someone to suggest trying to apply medicine to the wound. Turan looks over the scene and realizes this is a mess, remarking that they are lucky there were no casualties. It was a surprise attack by a monster, but he notes this was a fight where they could have avoided serious injuries altogether. He looks at Azella and Marvin, considering the fact that since their bodies get stronger based on their mana, these nobles should be several times tougher than the knights. Despite this, they did not hesitate to use people weaker than them as shields. Marvin notices Turan's stare and asks if something is wrong, but Turan tells him it is nothing. Azella calls Turan over, nodding that the most important part of the battle is to absorb the monster's mana, and she welcomes him to the absorption party, to which he agrees. The three gather around the monster's remains and raise their hands. As Turan begins the process, he reflects on how the books were right. Even if multiple people absorb mana at once, the degree of enhancement does not seem to be reduced. Azella stops absorbing mana, frustrated that she has already reached her maximum and complaining about her crappy growth limit, while Marvin reaches his limit soon after. But Turan continues the absorption process naturally, prompting Azella to finally understand why her father sent him along. He possesses incredible spell proficiency and a mana capacity that rivals her own. She is amazed to think he is a noble who hasn't even reached his growth limit yet. As the sun sets, the group returns to the capital. Marvin reflects that they would have never defeated the monster without Turan, crediting him for everything from his tracking ability to the hit that knocked the beast down. Turan asks him to stop, insisting it wasn't anything spectacular. He admits he regrets noticing the monster too late and allowing it to get the first strike, as he did not expect the creature to have a search ability. Marvin asks with surprise if it really had a search ability. Turan says yes, and explains that different abilities seem to awaken depending on the monster's external traits. He points out that the monkey had unusually big hands and big eyes, which were not part of its original form, meaning it probably awakened an ability to throw things with great force and the ability to see far away or through the forest. Marvin is impressed that Turan figured all of that out so quickly, and Turan explains that he looked through a monster encyclopedia at the library earlier. Marvin calls the library a stuffy place where no one goes. Azella mentions she went there once a long time ago out of curiosity, but found the books too difficult and left before reading even half a volume. Turan suggests that the next time she goes, she should ask the librarian if there are any easy books. Azella is confused and asks if there is even someone like that in the library. This reaction leaves Turan feeling confused. Turan heads back to the library and the librarian greets him by name as he enters, making him realize he was careless. He knows that no knight or commoner would ever call a noble by their first name, as everyone in the city uses the term esteemed one. He also thinks that the way she looks does not exactly scream librarian. He asks how she knows his name. The girl looks at him in surprise and then smiles, asking if he only noticed it now. She reveals she learned it from his permit and declares that as long as it is around this library, her gaze can reach anywhere. Turan asks how he should address her, and she says she doesn't really have a name, so he can call her whatever he wants. She suggests something cute like my love, but Turan decides he will just call her librarian. She calls him stiff and notes it is awkward for him to be polite after using her for days, calling her to do this and that, though Turan declares he never did that and tells her not to come so close because it is burdensome. He asks if she is a wizard from the old empire, but she says she was never a person to begin with, explaining she is a kind of spirit and asking if it suits her. She tells him that when a soul inhabits something living, it becomes a living spirit, but when it inhabits something neither alive nor dead, it is a regular spirit. In other words, the library itself is her. This human form is just for comfortable communication based on the user's preference, and she smiles, telling him that his preferences are kind of. Turan tells her not to make stuff up, but she insists she is like a reflection in water. Turan looks at her carefully and places his hand on her belly, but it goes right through it. She asks where he is touching and says it feels weird. Turan apologizes, and she complains about how annoying it is that she cannot directly exert power on intruders. She declares that if she could, she would have punished every last bastard who took books out of the library. Turan notes it seems House Voltas does not know she exists. She explains that until now, there was no one with the qualifications to perceive her. Her creator made it so only those whose type is complete beyond a certain level could see her, and she finds it romantic that only Turan can see her. Turan asks what she means by type, and she explains it is what wizards call a bloodline. He asks if she can tell him about his own bloodline, but she suggests asking his parents, to which Turan reveals he is an orphan. The spirit licks her lips and offers to check for him, saying she only needs his consent to examine his body. Turan asks what she means by that. The spirit laughs and makes a ghostly expression before suddenly sticking her hand into Turan's chest, which also goes right through his body, leaving him stunned. She laughs and notes that they are now connected. Turan tells her not to say weird things but realizes it doesn't hurt. She reveals that while there are a few small bits, the big chunks are the pursuer and hunter bloodlines, asking if that is a trait of House Zahar, and he says yes. However, she notes that there is one more bloodline and says that Turan is mixed. Turan asks what she means by mixed, and she explains he is the result of two people from different bloodlines, though she doesn't know what the other one is because it is still locked. She says a locked bloodline isn't that rare in bloodline combinations, and that it will open naturally as he grows stronger. Turan reflects on his mother, thinking she was far too polite and educated to be a commoner, making him wonder if she was a descendant of some noble with a bloodline so diluted it couldn't hold night-level mana. He tells the spirit he understands and thanks her, prompting her to tell him to stay one more month if he is truly grateful. From then on, Turan does not read alone. He asks the spirit about the contents of the books and requests explanations, asking if there are really that many invisible substances in the world. The librarian shares knowledge from books that were plundered and vanished thousands of years ago, teaching him that if he makes water float and looks through it, he will be able to see it directly. Turan finds these lessons on the laws of nature to be a treasure beyond measure. He learns that diseases arise from microorganisms and that the decay of living things is caused by the feeding of germs. He also grasps basic principles like the refraction of light, the generation of heat through friction, and the process of how living things get injured and how they heal. Turan decides to experiment with decay. He touches an apple before him and it quickly turns rotten. The librarian asks how his progress is, and Turan calls it incredible. While existing magic can achieve this effect, understanding the scientific principle allows him to consume far less mana. He realizes that simply changing the way he perceives the world has raised his skill as a wizard. He asks if powerful houses are monopolizing knowledge like this, nodding that if every wizard knew it, they would lose their competitive edge. The librarian notes that people's level of knowledge keeps dropping over time and says she now understands why. Turan eventually declares it is time for him to leave. He says that the owner of this place has been openly giving him hints to go. The librarian's spirit begs him to take her with him and tries to hug him, but she passes right through his body and hits the floor. Turan asks if she can even leave the place and she admits she cannot. She begs him to stay, promising to take good care of him, but Turan gently says he will pass. She huffs that he is never going to say he will stay. She encourages him to look around the land for the god's legacy, suggesting there might be spirits out there who know even more than she does. Turan promises to visit from time to time. She tells him to come if he wants to or not, though she is clearly sad to see him go. Turan smiles and says that there are still many books he has yet to read. He finally leaves the city, following a continental map he got from the library. House Zahar's base is in the Emerald Desert, east of Orem. He decides to head toward Zahar to find clues about his parents. As Turan walks, he notes that there is no need to rush. If the clues were going to disappear, they would have vanished sometime over the last 18 years, and if they are still there, arriving a little later will not make them vanish now. He continues to train, kill monsters, and absorb their mana. As he travels through the woods, he suddenly hears a horse neighing. He wonders what is happening and spots a majestic horse with a saddle. Turan realizes that the horse is not attacking the man lying on the ground, but is actually protecting him from attackers. One attacker calls it a demon and asks what kind of pet monster could be that strong. Turan watches closely, wondering if the horse is actually the one being targeted. Suddenly, Turan realizes who the attackers are. They are two dark elves, and one tells the other to try and create an opening somehow, to which the second elf replies that it is easier said than done. One dark elf uses magic as a purple energy spreads out, and monsters start to rise from the ground. Turan realizes this is the dark elf necromancy he read about in a book. He wonders if he should help but hesitates, thinking the man lying there might have been the one who attacked the dark elves first. His eyes widen in shock as he sees one of the dark elves eating a human arm. The first elf asks whose hand that is and tells the other to give her one too, but the second one tells her to eat her own, as she must have already taken some for herself. Turan realizes with disgust that they are cannibals. He activates his stealth magic and becomes invisible while the female dark elf remarks that the men she killed are too hairy. And as the male elf takes his final meal, he is killed by Turan's attack in an instant. The strike is so fast that the female elf cannot even react. The monsters summoned by the now dead elf vanish. Seeing this, the female elf panics and tells her monsters to gather and protect her, and the beasts immediately surround her. Turan attacks with a rock, but a monster blocks the projectile with its horn. The elf shouts, demanding to know who is there and ordering them to come out, as a buffalo monster charges in his direction and destroys the trees. The elf realizes her attacker is using stealth and declares they will see if he can still hide after this. As she summons a wolf monster, it releases a glowing orange aura that spreads through the area and detects Turan. Turan's magic fades away and he starts becoming visible. The elf also notices him and shouts that she has found the demon. She commands her monsters to kill him and they charge at him. Turan rubs his hands together and creates fire. He releases an explosion of flames at the monsters, which knocks out the wolf monster, but the buffalo remains unharmed. It rushes toward him, and Turan barely dodges the attack, falling to the ground. Turan realizes they are incredibly fast and thinks it is a good thing he took one of the elves out beforehand. Suddenly, Turan feels a sharp pain and looks down to see the wolf monster biting his leg. Turan kicks the beast away and stands up, but as he tries to look for the other monster, the buffalo runs toward him at full speed and sends him flying into a tree. Turan coughs up blood and falls to the ground as he is surrounded by the monsters and the elf. The dark elf laughs and says it serves him right, asking how he dared to kill Kel, and she declares she will make Turan beg to die. However, the horse suddenly strikes the dark elf in the head. The elf's head is crushed, and she screams as the horse continues to trample and kick her. The elf's beasts look back and start attacking the horse, saving the dark elf. The dark elf notes what a humiliation this is and vows to kill Turan, but Turan releases another attack, and this time it connects, blasting off the dark elf's head and killing her instantly. As her body falls to the ground, her summoned monsters also vanish. Turan is completely exhausted and collapses to the ground. He realizes that the fight took a lot out of him. The horse approaches and nuzzles Turan's head. Turan thanks the horse. Later that night, the unconscious man, a blonde-haired youth, wakes up by a campfire. He groans and then jumps up in surprise. He sees Turan sitting across the fire. Turan tells him he is finally awake. The boy asks who Turan is, and Turan explains that he saw him being attacked by dark elves and intervened to save him. The horse approaches the youth and the boy pets it, calling her Tilly. Turan remarks that Tilly is a good horse, nodding that not only did she understand she had to protect her master, but she even knew she needed to move him to a safer place. The boy thanks Turan for saving him and introduces himself as Aziz of House Berg, prompting Turan to give his own name in return. Turan asks if there was any particular reason Aziz came into conflict with the Dark Elves. Aziz explains there wasn't a specific reason. He was simply on a pilgrimage with his retainers when they were suddenly ambushed without provocation. Aziz begins to cry, saying he had heard these other races were savage but never imagined they would be this bad. He sobs for his fallen friends, explaining that the people he lost were very precious to him. Turan asks if they were his family, and Aziz replies that they were the knights and servants who came on the pilgrimage with him, and that they had practically raised him since he was little. Turan notes that Aziz seems like a good person. He asks if Aziz knows how many dark elves attacked because he killed 2 of them, and Aziz says that should be all of them. Turan then uses his search spell and senses the surrounding area. He confirms there are definitely no more dark elves nearby. Aziz asks Turan if he has any urgent business, and Turan says that he is also in the middle of a pilgrimage. Aziz is amazed that someone on a pilgrimage would have so much power, asking if Turan is the child of some great house and wondering why he is traveling alone. Turan replies that it is difficult for him to explain. He claims he is not that strong, saying he only managed to ambush 1 elf and barely fought off the other with the help of the red horse. Turan releases his mana, and Aziz is confused at first but also releases his own mana. They both check each other's power. Turan is shocked to realize the blonde man's amount of mana is incredible. If he hadn't absorbed the Dark Elf's mana, he would have even less than Aziz. Aziz thinks that, honestly, Turan's raw mana alone is at a level where he would not be overwhelmed by 2 necromancers. Deducing that Turan must be noble-born from a powerful bloodline, and that since he is on a pilgrimage, he probably hasn't even reached his growth limit yet. Aziz wonders why someone like that would be traveling alone. Aziz then asks Turan if, assuming he does not have a fixed destination, it would be all right to invite him to House Berg, promising to repay Turan for saving his life and asking him to safely escort him back to his house. Turan asks what Aziz means by repayment. Aziz gives a large grin and declares that those of House Berg are enchanters and vassals of Arabian, the great house to the north, explaining that they belong to a bloodline that has crafted magic tools for generations. He tells Turan that he will make him the finest magic tool worthy of his skills. Sometime later, they move deep within the forest and bury Aziz's subordinates, who were killed by the Dark Elves. Aziz lets out a quiet sigh and observes that things finally seem to be coming to an end. His voice carries a hint of relief, yet he reflects on a heavier thought, admitting that he would like to send everyone back to their hometowns if he could, but adds that it will be difficult. He turns toward Turan and thanks him, to which Turan glances at him, slightly puzzled, and asks for what. Aziz hesitates before answering that it is because Turan did not mock him. He is a noble, yet he cried at the sacrifices of his subordinates, calling it pathetic. So Turan asks why he would think that is pathetic, and Aziz replies quietly that it is because that is what his father taught him. Those who fall in a righteous battle shall dwell in the heavenly palace with the gods, as he was taught that to grieve for them would be weak, and that a true noble must move forward, standing upon that sacrifice. But if not grieving over a family member's death is strength, then he does not think he could ever become truly strong. Turan listens in silence before a warm smile appears on his face, and he says that it is not a sign of weakness but kindness. Aziz is taken aback, then tries to lighten the mood by suggesting they speak more comfortably since they are going to be traveling together anyway, nodding that the age difference between them is not that great either, and Turan gives a small nod and agrees. Aziz smiles and raises his hand, announcing that he looks forward to working with him as a friend. Turan stands still for a moment, repeating the word friend to himself. He reaches out and holds his hand, telling Aziz that he looks forward to that as well. After some time, Aziz suggests they rest before continuing, so they stop nearby, where Turan points to a box on the ground and asks what it is. Aziz opens the box, which is full of food and wine, identifying it as a cold storage chest, and explaining that he kept several things in it from the last time they were in the city. Turan wonders if the inside is always cold, so Aziz confirms that it is and explains that thanks to it, most foods can be stored for about a week without issue, adding that cold food can be reheated before showing off other tools. He notes that if you press a button on one tool, water comes out, mentions another magic tool that creates shelter from gathered wood, and a third that sounds an alarm when someone approaches. Aziz suddenly looks excited and gestures to his own clothes, explaining that what he is wearing is a magic tool with a self-cleaning function. Turan observes that magic tools are not common items and declares that it is impressive. He says that just one set of clothing alone would be worth saving his life, but Aziz smiles and declares his life is worth way more than that, promising to reward him with far better things when they return to the main house. He adds that if the house won't allow it, he will make them himself. He then changes the subject, nodding that during the time they have traveled together, he has seen so many types of Turan's magic that he has lost count. Listing off animal control, freezing, levitation, liquid manipulation, enhancement, luminescence, restraint, instant death, terrain transformation, and lightning strikes. He asks Turan if he spent his whole life practicing magic, or if he has a bloodline ability that lets him master any magic he wants. Turan narrows his eyes and mentally notes that he just can. He reminds Aziz they agreed not to pry into families, so Aziz quickly laughs and says he was just kidding, claiming there is no way such a bloodline ability even exists. He then asks how old Turan is, nodding he does not look older than 30 but wondering if he has lived for 80 years, and Turan answers that he has about a month left until his birthday and turns 18 this year. Aziz is completely shocked. He reveals that he is turning 43 this year, but then chuckles and says a 25-year difference is not that important to them. Aziz crosses his arms and says he should have known Turan had that much magic power to take down 2 wraith sorcerers, adding he was not expecting there to be 2 geniuses like him in the world, leading Turan to ask, too. Aziz explains the other person is close and has an incredible bloodline, revealing that the other genius is his cousin. Turan asks if he can ask that person to make magic tools for him, but Aziz says no because she is from the main house. Turan wonders about the main house, as Aziz explains she is a princess of Arabian and might even become the head of a great house someday. After that, they start walking. He explains that unlike ordinary wizard houses, heads of great houses do not easily pass positions to their own children. Because in a great house, there are dozens of relatives in the same generation, and naturally at least one of them is usually stronger than the head's own child. Yet among the head's children, Mesa was born with the greatest talent. After awakening her magic power, Mesa mastered all manner of combat magic in just 10 years. Turan is surprised as Aziz adds that as a result, she received the full support of her house, and now at only 21 she is almost on the same level as the core members of the house. Turan thinks about how much power she has at that age and asks if the house performed a funeral. Aziz says that is right and explains that when their eldest granduncle passed, his magic power was devoured by Mesa, though they naturally received portions as well. Turan realizes it is clear there is a good reason the great houses maintain their supremacy. Aziz points ahead, nodding that it seems they are almost there. Turan looks up and Aziz explains that this is the Dakin Plains, the central territory of Arabian. They eventually arrive at Zavillan, the territory of House Berg. As they enter the mansion, a woman rushes out and asks Aziz what on earth is happening. Aziz shouts, "Mom," and embraces her, starting to cry. Turan watches, mentally nodding that Aziz is 43 and yet reacts this way. A man with a beard approaches and tells Aziz to mind his dignity and at least address her as mother. So Aziz apologizes and then introduces Turan as a new friend from the south who risked his life to save him, stating that without him, he wouldn't have made it back here alive. The mother says this pilgrimage route wasn't supposed to be that dangerous and asks what happened. So Aziz reveals they were attacked by dark elf wraith sorcerers. She is furious and calls them filthy wretches, declaring she will take an army and tear them to shreds. The man from before calls her the house head and tells her to compose herself because people are watching. He then asks Turan which house he belongs to, and Turan replies that he is afraid he cannot say. The man asks if he cannot, and Turan admits he does not really know, explaining he was born to a commoner mother and does not know who his father is. Aziz is shocked and asks why he never told him about that, but Turan replies it is not something worth boasting about. The head of Berg looks at Turan of the unknown house and declares that since he saved her child, she shall see that he is properly rewarded. She tells him it is difficult to offer him a room there, but says she will arrange for him to stay at the finest inn in the city, making Aziz frustrated as he asks his mother if they shouldn't host him at home. She explains that would normally be fine, but they have an important guest staying with them now. Regardless of the circumstances, it is difficult to bring in a stranger of unknown origin, and she hopes he understands. A voice suddenly speaks up, telling the aunt she does not need to worry about her, as surely the person who saved Aziz would not suddenly try to assassinate her. A woman dressed in black appears. Aziz realizes it is Mesa and asks what she is doing here all of a sudden. Turan observes the Princess of Arabian, thinking she looks more like a corpse in her current state. Mesa explains that she is there to hide because she was nearly assassinated by Zahor's vermin. Aziz is shocked that an assassination attempt happened at the main house. Given how fortified that place is, he asks if there could be an insider. Mesa replies that there is probably an insider because the main house does not just have one or two people with questionable loyalties. She declares she is tired and retires first, saying good evening to everyone. After that, Aziz's mother calls her maid named Ina and tells her to show Turan the second best guest room in the house. The next day, Turan opens his eyes on a bed in the grand guest room. After resting, he walks through the hallway where he meets Aziz again. Aziz notes that Turan is up early as usual and asks what he is doing alone in the hallway. Turan points to a magic lantern on the wall and says he finds it interesting, so Aziz says he makes those every now and then for practice and tells Turan he can have one. After hearing this, Turan says he is not that interested. Suddenly, a massive flash of lightning rumbles through the windows, lighting up the hall. Turan looks at it in confusion, while Aziz explains it is Mesa practicing magic and notes she is always diligent. Turan asks if that was Arabian bloodline magic, and Aziz confirms it is the Storm bloodline. He admits he has never hated his own bloodline but says he is a little envious, as she looks like she is becoming a literal god. Turan is curious and wonders about how strong the next Arabian leader is. Aziz asks if he wants to take a look, but Turan says he is curious yet does not think it is a good idea for a suspicious outsider like him to approach. Aziz asks why that matters since he is not an assassin. He insists he can vouch for him and admits he is curious about who is stronger between Turan and Mesa. Turan says he thinks that is the real reason Aziz brought him there. Aziz laughs and says that, to tell the truth, he has been holding a grudge for a few years and wants to see Mesa frustrated for once. They go to the training grounds where Mesa is standing. Aziz calls out to her. She turns and asks Aziz who is beside him, so Turan introduces himself. Mesa repeats the name, remembering him from last night, and asks what brings them there. Aziz says they saw her practicing magic, so they thought they would join in just like they did in the past. But Mesa reminds Aziz that last time he stormed out crying after she learned something in 2 tries that took him a whole week, which makes Turan laugh. Aziz looks back at him and he quickly apologizes for laughing. Aziz asks Turan if he is mocking him too and then turns to Mesa. He declares Turan has magic talent second to none and suggests they have a duel. Mesa repeats the word duel and looks at Turan with a silent stare. Her eyes glow blue as her mana surges. Turan looks up at the sky where the weather has turned dark and a lightning storm descends. As she releases more mana, it becomes more terrifying, making her look like a monster. Turan's body stiffens under the sheer weight of her pressure and his eyes go wide. After it is over, Turan is left panting and sweating from the intensity. After a moment of silence, Mesa looks at him and says she hates to say this, but she does not think Turan is a match for her. Mesa is sorry to say this, but it looks like it will be a bit difficult for him to duel her. Turan stays silent while he stares at her with a focused and determined expression. Aziz steps in with a wide grin and tells her that, in terms of magical power, he certainly would be no match for her. However, he adds that what is truly incredible about this guy is his ability to learn magic. He puts a hand on Turan's shoulder and declares that he is a genius unlike any he has seen in his entire life. Aziz looks at her and asks if even Mesa herself probably does not reach that level of talent. She replies that since Aziz is praising him so much, they should see what he is capable of doing. Turan looks back at her and suggests a new method for their competition. He asks how about they each show a magic that the other probably does not know, and whoever can perform it faster wins. Aziz turns to her and says that it is a good method before asking for her thoughts. She heard Turan does not even know the magic of his own bloodline yet. She explains that it would be unfair if she used her innate magic, so she decides to leave that out of the duel. She tells them she will start first and steps forward on the training ground. Mesa taps the stone floor with her foot and creates a small sprout that bursts through the floor. Turan and Aziz watch as the tiny plant begins to grow rapidly and turn into massive vines that coil around the entire courtyard. Aziz shouts in terror as the vines wrap around him and lift him high into the air. He hangs upside down, while Mesa looks at Turan and identifies the spell as plant creation and manipulation magic, asking if he can do it. Aziz screams and begs to be let go because he is getting dizzy, but she ignores him and tells him to stay like that for a moment because it is fun. Turan reflects on the principles of magic while he looks at the vines. Fire creation magic is merely the manifestation of the phenomenon of burning, and water creation magic is simply the act of extracting invisible moisture from the air. Turan crouches down and places his hand flat against the hard stone floor. He thinks to himself that these vines are the same way, as the magic involves forcing seeds already planted in the ground to sprout rapidly. He realizes that in other words it is not creation, but rather growth. He tells the seed to grow, and a bright blue pulse of mana flows around it. In a split second, several blue vines explode from the floor and weave around Turan. Mesa watches with a shocked expression as the plants follow Turan's will perfectly. Aziz is shocked too. She realizes that given Turan told the plant to grow, he has independently discovered the true nature of this magic. She asks him if he happened to see this magic used somewhere before, to which Turan replies that it is his first time ever seeing it. Mesa HMPH and notes that the things Aziz said today actually turned out to be right for once, which is rare. She releases her magic, and Aziz falls to the ground, groaning in pain. She stands firm and tells Turan that now it is his turn to propose the challenge to her. Turan thinks to himself that using the Zahar's bloodline magic would be suicidal here. Suddenly, he remembers something and he reaches his hand out toward the tall grass. From the grass, a small rat appears and runs toward him. She watches it and asks with doubt if it is just animal control magic and if this is the best he can do. He catches a small rat and holds it tightly in his hand. He tells her it is hardly that and explains that this little guy here is just the ingredient for his magic. He uses his magic, he grips the rat as blue energy begins to pulse around the animal's struggling body. Its life force is drained and its body withers away. The rat turns into a dried husk within Turan's hand. He holds out the dead animal and declares that he is done with his magic. She looks on with a serious face before announcing that now it is her turn. She gestures with her finger and a second rat runs toward her. She grabs it and tries to use the same magic Turan used, but nothing happens to the rat. She closes her eyes and concentrates as she realizes this is not ordinary magic and wonders how he did that anyway. Aziz looks at the scene and asks why Turan would use that kind of disgusting magic. Turan admits that it was just the first thing that came to mind when he was asked. He looks at her and wonders if even a great family like the Arabian house does not know this principle well. Aziz tells her that it seems it is not working and suggests they just give the victory to Turan. Mesa tells him to shut up and asks him if he thinks she cannot do this. When using magic, the causality factor is an extremely complex element. If the phenomenon one intends to cause is something natural, the magic is more efficient. If the user clearly recognizes the cause of the magical phenomenon and the amount of mana is adequate, the spell succeeds. Among these, the capacity to perceive the cause of the phenomenon is an important factor that simultaneously influences the success rate and mana consumption. She just needs a little more time. One of the ways to compensate for the lack of causality is to invest a large amount of mana, filling the inefficiency with volume. Mesa tells the rat to rot while it is still alive. Suddenly, the rat in her hand shrieks as its skin turns to rot. The creature is turned into a mummified husk exactly like the one Tyran created. Aziz notes that it worked. She huffs and says in a tired voice that she really did it. Suddenly, she feels a sharp wave of exhaustion and her vision begins to blur. She collapses to the ground while Aziz screams her name and runs to help her. Tyran and Aziz crouch beside her as they look at her unconscious form. Tyran wonders what the reason could be and if she used too much mana during the spell. He reflects that people don't usually faint just from depleting their mana alone. At most, she should suffer from exhaustion since she lost even the strength needed to support her own body. He looks at her hand and realizes the problem, identifying that she is suffering from a lack of physical nutrients. Tyran lifts her in his arms and asks Aziz if there is no mage with a healing bloodline around here to assist them. Aziz tells him that there isn't anyone like that nearby. Tyran tells Aziz to have them bring water and salt to the ladies' room and bring the adults as well. As he carries her, he realizes that she is so light that he almost confuses her for a lamb rather than a person. Even the mana she used to barely sustain a body that shouldn't even be able to stand has been exhausted. After some time, Mesa opens her eyes and Aziz's mother, her auntie, rushes into Mesa's bedroom and screams her name, asking if she is conscious. Mesa asks why she is here. The woman explains that Aziz told her that she suddenly fainted while training magic with the guest. Mesa remembers what happened. The woman asks her if it is true and wonders if that man happened to do something to her. Mesa declares that no and says it was not his fault at all. She explains that it was just a small mistake on her part and that's all there is to it. Mesa begs everyone to leave because her head is throbbing with pain. The aunt stays for a second to tell her she made some soup and places the bowl on the bedside table. The aunt tells Mesa that she knows she does not eat because of magic, but says she needs to think about her health too. She tells her to try to eat at least a little before she finally leaves the room. Mesa watches her aunt go and then says a soft thank you. She then looks at the bowl and lifts it. She takes a spoonful of the warm soup and eats it. But she is struck by a terrifying memory of her mother and sister getting attacked. She remembers them crying out for her to save them because they believed she could do it. Mesa groans in pain and drops the bowl and it shatters when it hits the floor and she tries to calm herself. Meanwhile, Tyran is sent to lock up in the Berg family basement and finds himself at the temple of the limping goddess. He stares at the giant winged statue in the golden light of the basement. A guard dressed in black draws his sword and tells Tyran that both the doors and the walls are solid without a single crack, and he thinks they are like muscles trained for hundreds of years. He tells him to give up on any thought of trying to break in and leave. This man is Haram Berg. Tyran tells him that he understands and he was not even thinking about doing such a thing. Haram tells him that it is very solid and Tyran says yes, but Haram comes closer and says extremely. Tyran wonders if the guard is currently bragging to him. Haram suddenly performs a swift swing with his longsword and Tyran's eyes follow the movement. He gets curious and asks Haram what he is doing. Haram replies he is training. Haram moves his body in a rhythmic flow, performing a series of strikes and steps. Tyran watches closely and observes that there was no movement wasted. Each movement was the minimum preparation to apply the next force in his strike. Tyran asks himself if this could be the efficiency of a truly trained body. Haram stops his training and looks at Tyran. Tyran quickly apologizes, asking if he interrupted him. Haram says no and asks him what he saw in his movement just now. Haram gets extremely close to Tyran's face and waits for his answer. Tyran declares that he thought it was incredible. The guard steps back and explains that most nobles consider martial arts insignificant because it is easier to attack from afar with magic. It is all because their physical bodies are weak and their minds cannot dominate their bodies and rely on cheap tricks. Tyran says that unless it is a bloodline specialized in physical combat, like the Hercules strength bloodline, focusing on magical power ends up being a more efficient decision for them. However, he adds that when going through trials, situations eventually arise that you must face even if you want to avoid them. After that, Haram holds his sword out to Tyran and tells him to hold it. Tyran asks him if he really wants to give a weapon to a suspicious person like himself, even though he was sent to lock him up here. Haram smiles and says it does not matter, this weapon is just a piece of iron. He explains that what makes it a sword is the body of the one wielding it, and tells him that he cannot cut him with his weak body anyway. Tyran grips the sword in hand and wonders what he could even do with this sword. Haram looks at him. Tyran's entire body erupts with a massive aura of blue flame and mana. The intense power radiates from Tyran as he holds the sword and stares directly at Haram. Tyran flares his massive blue mana, holding the iron sword firmly in his hand. Haram looks at him and shouts that it is not right, telling him to stop pouring mana into the weapon. Turan simply replies with an alright and suppresses his energy. Haram steps closer and starts adjusting Turan's posture manually. He commands him to put more weight on his front legs and press down so the earth bears the blow. He tells Turan that his elbow is rising too much and warns that with such weak elbows, he cannot overcome the sword's weight. He adds that at this rate, his thigh will get pierced through by an opponent. He tells Turan to raise his arm and orders him not to set his own limits. Turan replies, "Yes, sir." Haram nods and tells him that was good, ordering 10 repetitions next. He tells him not to stop his breathing and instructs him to breathe directly into his muscles. The seasoned guard observes that Turan is a fine vessel, and if possible, he needs to make time to wring that body dry. Haram declares that mana is mere parlor tricks. He claims that wizards mistakenly assume their physical abilities are guaranteed, but says that is only the minimum function your body possesses. He tells Turan that a properly trained body tears through the battlefield without the need for mana, and insists he needs to understand that difference. Turan huffs from the effort and says he will bear that in mind. Suddenly, Turan turns his gaze as the heavy doors of the temple open and spots Asiz's mother entering the room. She bows her head deeply and asks for a pardon, telling Turan she has done something unforgivable to their benefactor. Turan remains composed and suggests he is the one who should apologize, guessing the young lady was unharmed. As a guest, his conduct was inappropriate. The head of House Berg explains that Mesa wanted to give him a proper apology, and she asks him if he would happen to have some free time. Later, Turan finds himself alone with Mesa in a grand parlor. She stands by a large window and reflects that this situation is troublesome, saying she heard Turan was trapped in the temple because of her. She tells him she is sorry for causing such unnecessary commotion. He walks toward her and says it was necessary, declaring he is just glad she is safe. She looks at him and asks about the magic from yesterday, specifically the one that makes animals rot, wondering if that is an undisclosed bloodline magic. She tells him the mana consumption was absurdly high and asks if he lied to her about it. Turan says no and explains that, if she understands the principle, she should be able to use it easily as well. She hums and notes it seems he won't teach it for free, but if he doesn't reveal the method, there is no proof it isn't bloodline magic, is there? Turan declares he does not particularly mind whether he wins or not. She looks confused and asks what he means, declaring that if things end like this, it would make her look bad as the Princess of Arabian. She offers a deal, proposing that if he tells her the secret of that magic, she will teach him one of Arabian's secret arts in return. Turan smiles and says he has no objections in that case. He starts explaining the logic, stating that basically the root is bioenhancement magic. He asks if she used microorganisms no one can see, and she confirms this is correct. She is shocked, realizing it is no wonder the efficiency was so high since she did not know about those hidden factors. She sighs in irritation and admits the loss was hers. Although she succeeded at the end of their duel, it was done through brute force. Turan suggests that he considered that part of the wager, but Mesa insists that is not right. She claims that when discussing magic skills, they do not include the amount of mana recklessly poured out. A little embarrassed, she asks if he can tell Aziz that it was a draw, as she does not want to see Aziz getting cocky about winning. Turan understands. She then decides to give him his compensation and picks up a comb. She demonstrates by rubbing the comb against a surface and explains that when objects rub like this, they attract each other. She looks at Turan with confidence and starts explaining why, but he interrupts her and declares this is static electricity. Her expression goes completely blank in shock as she asks him if he already knew about it, and Turan confirms he did. She mutters that this alone was considered one of their quite profound secret arts, and tells Turan she will think a bit more about how to repay him, since she needs to find what he does not know. She suggests that until sufficient compensation comes to mind, they should train together from now on. She quickly adds that this is just to repay her debt and not because she particularly needs him around. Turan gives a warm smile and agrees, suggesting that starting tomorrow, they should meet in the garden in the evening. The scene shifts to a massive dining hall filled with incredible amounts of gourmet food. Aziz's mother tells him the table isn't much, but asks him to eat to his full. Aziz looks at the feast and asks why she prepared it so lavishly, nodding he hasn't seen things like this even on his birthday, adding that anyone who sees this would think the Lord of Arabian himself had visited. The mother tells him to be quiet. Turan looks at the table and notes there is no way this is an ordinary meal. The head of house turns back to Turan and brings up their earlier talk. She asks if it is true her son promised a powerful magic tool as the price of his life. Turan confirms this is correct. The mother asks if Turan has something specific in mind. He wants something that aids in defense. He explains that while it is easy to harm others with magic, protecting oneself is difficult. If possible, it should be able to protect from surprise attacks. The mother says she has made similar items before, so it should not be difficult. However, she notes they do not have anything ready immediately. Aziz speaks up and asks if he may make the item for Turan, but the mother tells him that if he is thinking of dragging House Berg's honor through the mud, he should stop. Aziz's brother Milo raises his hand and says he will make it, stating he just finished a commission from the main house and has free time. The mother asks how he intends to make it. Milo explains that for defense against surprise attacks, something Turan can carry at all times would be best. He will embed mana into jewelry like rings, earrings, or necklaces to create a function that draws out a guardian bloodline's defensive power. The mother notes that is acceptable and asks for the time frame. Milo answers 1 month. The mother mentions that while nothing is more unseemly than a parent bragging about their child, Milo is already a skilled wizard not far behind her. Turan realizes the gravity of the gift, thinking that a magic tool made by the head wizard of an enchanter's house over a full month is a bit excessive. He speaks up, expressing his appreciation but wondering if it is too much. The mother asks if it is excessive, then asks if it means her son's life is worth that little. It isn't excessive at all. She then orders Turan to stay as a guest at their house for the next month. She tells him to make himself at home and stay comfortably. The next morning, Turan and Aziz walk through the bustling streets of Zavillan. Aziz notes that it seems his mother has taken quite a liking to him. Aziz admits he talked more about Turan to her before bed, mentioning his talent and the fact that he never neglects his training. He reveals that originally she wanted to look down on him as just a wandering noble without backing, but her views shifted. Turan observes that it sounds like she is trying to recruit him into their house. Aziz confirms this, explaining that she gives generously, puts people in debt, and then introduces a pretty young lady as a way to tempt them. He mentions several adults in the house joined that way. Turan notes this is troubling. Aziz tells him not to worry and says the magic tool is just something nice to buy favor. He assures Turan he won't be forced into marriage even if he wants the magic tool, claiming his mother is not so lacking in refinement. He then asks what Turan has for the rest of the day. Turan explains he promised to train with Lady Mesa in the evening and asks if there is anything the matter. Hearing evening, Aziz says there is still quite a bit of time until then. He pulls Turan toward a different area, telling him to patrol with him instead. He promises Zavillan may not be the capital, but there is plenty to enjoy. He jokes, asking if Turan was planning to hole up in a corner practicing magic on a day like this. Turan admits that actually he was. Aziz tells him life is too short not to enjoy it, my friend, and drags him along. Aziz takes Turan to a casino with roulette tables and card games, but Turan refuses it. Later, they visit a lively bar for drinks and he still refuses. They wander through the market of the city. Suddenly, Turan stops and stares at the posters on a wall. His eyes widen in shock as he looks at the drawn face and thinks about Kjorn. He asks himself if it could truly be that Kjorn. After that, they go to see a drama where blades clash as they tell a story. It was the year 2195 when the warriors of Arabian ventured into that demon desert. And there was a knight named Kjorn who defeated the enemy with God's help after a hard-fought battle. Turan and Aziz applaud at the end. Aziz asks Turan if it was worth watching, and he answers that it was very good. He remembers Kjorn saying he is merely an ordinary knight and thinks his humility is unmatched. He vows that someday when he meets Kjorn, he must ask if that story is really true. Early the next morning, Turan opens his eyes and sees Haram staring at him. Haram asks if his body rested well. Turan says yes and asks what brings the man there. Haram says he noticed yesterday that Turan's vessel is quite good. He declares it is toughening time and commands Turan to follow him. Turan asks if they are going to train, and Haram says the body does not grow stronger by lying around, but only when it is being tempered. He asks Turan if he does not want to do it. Turan agrees to go, thinking he will gain more that way than just playing. Aziz suddenly bursts into the room, shouting Turan's name and saying he heard there was a really fantastic performance today. He sees his uncle Haram Berg and is surprised. Haram looks at him and says they are heading to training. He tells Aziz that he must also temper that weak body of his and asks if he will come. But Aziz backs away with a terrified expression and lies, saying he was just out and came back now, so he has not recovered yet. He runs away at full speed. Turan watches him go and wonders why he is acting like that. But he soon finds out the reason as he is forced into a heavy weightlifting session. Haram looms over him as Turan push-ups massive plates. He tells him not to hear his body's cry and demands one more. Turan groans in agony. Haram scolds him, saying that if he yields after barely this much pain, then his mind is being dominated by his body's weakness. He commands one last repetition as Turan's muscles tremble. Finally, Haram says that is enough and lets him stop. Turan collapses on the floor, gasping for air. Haram asks if it is tiring and Turan gasps yes. Haram says Turan is fortunate because since he is a wizard, doing this once is enough. Turan wonders if it is different if you are not a wizard. Haram explains that an ordinary body weakens again over time even after being tempered once and needs constant trials to maintain it in that case. However, wizards have mana maintaining their bodies in optimal condition, so once forged into steel, it does not weaken. He smiles at Turan and declares he must be fully rested now. Turan looks at him in shock and tries to say he is still, but Haram's expression turns dark as he says he knows Turan's body does not lie. He shouts that Turan has rested enough and now he will teach him weaponry and combat. Turan screams in exhaustion as the training intensifies. The following days at House Berg were fulfilling indeed. He wakes up early to train with Haram in a special space where the body becomes several times heavier than usual. One misstep and you'll be buried in the floor. In the evening, he returned to the mansion to repeat magic training with Mesa. She shows him how to use finger friction to generate electricity as golden lightning crackles between her hands. And before he knew it, 3 weeks had passed. Turan tries to fire a bolt of lightning at a target, but it misses. Mesa watches from behind and notes he is struggling more than expected. Turan smiles and says it is because he isn't from Arabian. She admits it is hard for her to help too, nodding she never thought of aiming lightning magic in that way. She asks if it doesn't hit just if you shoot it, but Turan explains it is harder than one may think. Suddenly someone shouts Lady Mesa, and a man comes near them. That man looks at Turan and asks who he is. Mesa looks at the man coldly and says it is none of his business, asking what brings him there. She reminds him she told the main house that no one should approach her while she is recovering. He reveals that the patriarch has summoned her. She asks what it is and tells him to answer quickly, warning him to prepare himself to be punished if it's a trivial reason. The knight reveals the emergency, announcing that dark elves have been rampaging extensively in the south. He reports that 3 cities have already fallen, and the main house will assemble an expedition force. Mesa orders the messenger to tell them she will return shortly, and the messenger bows to her, accepts his order, and leaves. She turns to Turan and tells him she thinks she needs to go. She pauses for a second and reflects that before she leaves, she should collect payment for Turan's disgusting decomposition magic. She suddenly gets an idea and claps her hands. She looks Turan in the eye and asks him if he knows that electricity flows through the human body as well. Turan is confused by this question and asks if electricity can really flow through the human body, which prompts Mesa to smirk. She declares that there is no way he would know as this is a secret of House Arabian. She suggests considering his debt paid if she teaches this to him properly, saying it will definitely be a great help, and Turan agrees. Mesa explains the fundamental theory, telling him that when a person sees or feels something, that specific part of the body sends a tiny electrical signal to the brain. She details that if it comes from the eyes, it travels from the eyes to the brain, and if it is a smell, it moves from the nose. Turan shuts his eyes to focus while he mentally traces these pathways. He realizes that a tiny electrical signal indeed flows through the entire body. If he can accelerate those signals transmitted through those pathways, he will achieve something incredible. He focuses on this tiny electrical signal more. And opening his eyes now, he can clearly notice those signals. A butterfly flies between them, and he can see its movements in slow motion and in more detail. She asks if he is able to do it and how it feels. He is impressed by this, wondering how this works and what it is. However, the effort causes a sharp strain and Turan gasps while clenching his forehead. Mesa laughs softly at his success, explaining he feels that way because he poured out his mana so recklessly. She mentions that while it will be hard to adjust now because of the headache, once he gets used to it, he will be able to maintain it for quite a while. He reflects on the value of the technique and states that no matter how much he thinks about it, this lesson seems far too valuable compared to what he gave her. She begins to float into the air and tells him to think of it as a simple investment since he seems to have talent. If he ends up learning an even more incredible spell in the future, she will collect it all back along with what he owes her now. She disappears into the distance while he watches her go in silence. The scene shifts to the Morgan City Center at the heart of the Dakin Plains, where knights and wizards of Arabian are gathered. A massive crowd of local people is cheering with slogans like "Glory to Arabian" and "Long live Arabian." Aziz remarks that even though it is just a departure ceremony to hunt dark elves, it feels more like a victory parade because of the enthusiasm. He suddenly spots Mesa on horseback and waves his arms, shouting for her to look over there. His father grabs his arm and tells him to maintain his composure as a noble. Suddenly, someone shouts that the head of the house is entering. A tall figure walks through the cheering crowds. Turan looks at the man and identifies him as the current head of the Arabian house, known as Battle Arabian. He says that the head of the house does not look well at all and asks Aziz if he is always so pale, wondering if his health could be failing. Aziz recalls rumors that the Lord was severely injured while fighting the head of the Zahar house in the past, but since that was a long time ago, perhaps it is just because of his old age. Battle Arabian reaches his hand toward the sky, and people look at him and look up at the sky, and the blue light turns dark and gloomy as storm clouds gather instantly. A massive surge of golden lightning explodes through the clouds with a deafening rumble. The commoners start praying to the Lord of Thunder to protect his descendants. Turan looks at the sky and realizes this is the true power of Arabian. Even with his body in such poor condition, he easily covers the entire area, showing the absolute pinnacle of magic reached by a human. With determination, he thinks that one day he will reach that level as well. Sometime later, back in the workshop of House Berg, Milo holds out a leather-bound metal bracelet and says, "Here you go." He explains that just wearing it increases his physical stamina a bit, but if he injects mana, that level increases even further. Milo details that at its limit, it reaches a level similar to the nobles of the Guardian bloodline, but warns it consumes a lot of mana, so he should not maintain it for too long. Turan holds the magic tool and declares it is truly an incredible treasure. He notes that an object like this would not be common even among the great houses, and calls it an exceptionally well-made item. Aziz's mother says his name and asks if he has any interest in formally joining their house. Turan remains polite and says he is very grateful for the offer but thinks that would be difficult. The mother sighs and notes she already heard stories from Aziz. She reflects that since Turan has a lot to do, he would have a hard time settling down in one place. She tells him to consider her offer as an old woman's lingering attachments. Turan bows his head and declares he will never forget the hospitality he received. He says Aziz and the Berg family will be his friends forever. She nods and says yes, that is enough. As Turan prepares to depart and leave the house, Haram Berg and Aziz meet him. Haram throws a blade at him and tells Turan to take it. He explains it is a magical device with no major functions, but notes it is durable and the blade is quite sharp. Turan takes the weapon and thanks his master. Hearing the word master makes Haram proud. He gives a stern and wide smile and starts walking away. Aziz walks up and throws a heavy cloak over Turan's shoulders. Turan asks what this is, and Aziz asks if he wasn't jealous of his clothes before. He reveals it is a shirt and some pants made into magic items that do not get dirty easily and mend themselves if lightly torn. Turan smiles at him, and Aziz tells him that Turan is a good friend, not just because he saved his life, but because spending time together and seeing the way he lives gave him a lot to think about. He asks where Turan is planning to go now, and Turan says he will head east first. Aziz mentions Carmine is over there and shakes his head, advising him that if he can avoid it, he should not take a ship. He complains that the waves are truly the worst, and even the wine glasses end up dancing. Turan smiles to himself, thinking he would have to brave those waves to reach the land of Zahar in the Elril Desert, but notes he cannot say that out loud. Aziz tells him that someone as stubborn as he won't starve to death anywhere, telling him to return safely and pay him back for the cloak. Turan says yeah and leaves. He begins his trek through the tall grass. He reflects on being alone again as he walks with a large bag on his back. He decides to test the efficiency of his training. Turan activates his movement magic and takes a single step. He moves so fast that people do not even see him. To them, they only feel a gust of wind as he continues his journey. He covers an immense distance, passing through villages and cities and dashing through forests. After a long time, he comes to a stop. He is in a jungle looking up at a mountain and smells something. He first thinks that it is the smell of a campfire, but quickly realizes it is something far more disgusting, like the smell of burning flesh. His eyes go wide as he reaches that location. He enters a destroyed town and is shocked by what he finds, seeing ruins and wooden debris covering the ground. He walks through the town and sees rows of mutilated corpses of men tied to posts. He wonders if they could have been attacked by bandits because those dark elves should not have come this far. He looks at the surrounding area, and while investigating a ruined structure, he spots something. It is a basement entrance. He approaches it and looks at it, thinking that it is here. He grabs the doors of the basement and yanks them open. He looks into the darkness and what he sees shocks him. A young girl is sitting in the corner. She cries and screams in fear. He jumps down, holding up a hand and telling her to wait, declaring that he is not an enemy and came to help. The girl looks up with tear-filled eyes and asks if he is telling the truth. He replies yes and asks if she can tell him what happened, while the child weeps and claims that a wizard killed everyone. Turan asks if she means a wizard. But before the girl can answer, she collapses from exhaustion. He lifts her and reflects that fortunately it is nothing serious, as she is likely just exhausted from being trapped for so long. He decides he needs to get this child somewhere safe first. As he begins to carry her out, an arrow made of solidified blue mana is aimed directly at him. A group of warriors is surrounding him, and a girl wizard holding a magic bow glares at him with rage, calling him a murderous bastard and telling him to get on his knees. But Turan just stands there holding the unconscious child, not understanding what is happening. Turan stands perfectly still in the charred remains of the village. carefully holding the unconscious child as a group led by a blonde female archer surrounds him. The female archer pulls back the string of her shimmering blue mana bow and shouts for Turan to get on his knees immediately. She glares at him with pure hatred, calling him a damn murderer. Her voice trembles with rage as she asks if this massacre was not already enough for him, that he is even trying to kidnap a little child, and shouts for him not to move another inch. A knight behind her begins to manifest fire magic and threatens that if Turan moves even slightly, he will kill him, as his hands tremble while he struggles to control his magical energy. Turan stays calm and tells them to wait, explaining that what they are seeing and thinking is simply just a misunderstanding. Suddenly, the nervous knight who is struggling to control his magical energy loses his control completely and accidentally releases a massive torrent of flames directly toward Turan and the young girl. A deafening explosion rocks the site, sending a pillar of fire and smoke into the sky. The woman turns her head and screams at the man, Gil, calling him an idiot because there was a child standing there, while Gil panics and tries to explain that it was an accident, saying he was just so nervous that he lost control. She notices something and looks up as the smoke clears and a shocking sight greets them. Turan remains standing without a single scratch on himself or the child, protected by a glowing blue shield from his bracelet. He looks down at the magic tool and mentally notes that he did not think he would have to use this so soon. The knights are frozen in awe, asking if he actually blocked the magic with just his physical body and how he does not have a single burn mark. The blonde woman wonders what kind of defensive magic he is using, or if it is a specific bloodline ability. Turan declares with a cold and stern tone that he is not the one who attacked this village, telling them again that this is all a misunderstanding. However, his patience reaches its limit, and he warns them that if they attack him again, he won't just defend himself next time. Sensing the sheer density of his mana, she lowers her bow and stops her aggression, reflecting that his explanation makes sense as there would be no reason for a person to cause such a tragedy and then stay behind just to save a child. The archer introduces herself as Bison and asks for his name, so he tells them his name is Turan. Bison notes that even if the circumstantial evidence says otherwise, she finds it hard to believe him yet. Turan points toward the child he is carrying and suggests they ask her the details when she eventually wakes up, nodding that it seems she saw the real culprit. Bison looks shocked and repeats the words, asking if the girl actually saw the arsonist, while Turan looks confused and asks what she means by the arsonist. Bison is surprised by his lack of knowledge and asks if he really does not know who the arsonist is, to which Turan replies that he does not. She explains that the arsonist is the mad mage who committed this atrocity. For the past few months, this killer has been periodically attacking isolated villages, tying up residents and burning them alive. She reveals that because there are never any survivors, they do not even know his gender, and all they know about this person is that people refer to him as the arsonist. Eventually, the little girl wakes up and confirms Turan's innocence to the group, telling them that the man who attacked was wearing a red cloak and had a messy beard. She says he had a very scary look, describing him as looking like a lumberjack, and after hearing this, the group finally realizes their mistake. They are overcome with shame for attacking an innocent person. Bison and the others bow their heads, stating she is sorry and admitting they were rude because they were so impatient. She tells Turan it was clearly her mistake to point a weapon at him, and Gil says he is sorry too. Turan watches them and reflects that even among nobles, some let their sense of duty override their reason, remembering that Midden was an honest and good leader. Turan looks at the group and tells them that since they are concerned about the child's health above all else, that is all that matters and he forgives them. He then asks them if they originally came here to capture the arsonist. Bison says yes and explains that they had arrived at the site of a fresh fire, and when they saw him they thought they had finally caught the culprit, but notes it turned out like this. She declares that now that they have a proper description, they will catch him soon because they have a natural tracker among them. Turan is curious about this person and asks for clarification. Since they have a tracker with them, he asks if they are from the Zahar family and why they are in a place like this. Bison quickly raises her hand and replies that no, they are not from the Zahar family. She tells him her full name is Bison Carmine, stating she comes from the Carmine family and these are her friends from their vassal families. She gestures to her gray-haired teammate and explains her identity, nodding that a Shah is a descendant of someone whose ancestors mixed blood with a Zahar noble. Bison explains that a Shah's bloodline manifested weakly, but it allows her to be quite good at tracking magic despite having no talent for concealment, and in the family, they refer to it as a primitive bloodline. Bison says that since all misunderstandings have been resolved, she has a serious request for Turan, asking if he could help them hunt down the arsonist. To sweeten the deal, she offers him the entire reward for the Mad Mage's capture and even promises to give him her own share of the mana they would absorb, telling him that all she needs is to earn the merit for completing the mission. Turan asks if she knows the power level of this arsonist since she has never seen him before, and Bison warns him that the man is definitely a noble-level mage. She mentions that some of the villages he attacked were protected by several knights, yet all of them were killed. Turan narrows his eyes since this arsonist not only killed so many normal people, but also killed several knights. There is no doubt that this arsonist is strong and could very well be a noble-level mage just like Bison is saying. He mentally reflects on how the weak demonic beasts along the road do not increase his strength anymore, and considers that maybe the arsonist is exactly the kind of opponent he needs right now and gives his approval. Making Bison happy to hear it, and he tells them that before beginning the hunt, they should first get the child to safety. The group travels to a safe nearby location, where Turan provides the village elder with enough money to raise the child until she is fully grown. The elder accepts the pouch of coins and declares that of course he can count on him to take care of her. To make sure of the child's safety, Turan glares at the elder and says he will be back in a few years to check in, so he should take care of the child as he is told. The village elder flinches in fear and says that they can rest assured he will take care of the child. After that, the expedition officially begins as Turan and the others return to the destroyed village. Asha, whose ancestors mixed blood with a Zahar noble, closes her eyes and forces her power until she suddenly opens her eyes as she senses something. They start walking into the jungle and Asha takes the lead, telling them that they still need to look a bit more. Turan asks which way they should move, and Asha tells them to follow her following the clues through dense woods and rocky paths. They see many trees are destroyed along the way as Asha eventually halts and starts checking the surroundings for a clue while Bison and the others follow closely behind. Turan asks her how exactly she is tracking him. Asha turns and explains that first she looked for human footprints, and when they reached the main road she followed the scent of ash. She reasons that if he has not changed clothes, the killer will still be covered in ash residue after burning the entire village. Turan finds her method quite professional and realizes that is why she could not find him before, since she did not even know his gender. Suddenly, Asha declares that she found it and starts running in that direction while Bison tells her to wait and slow down a bit. After some time of running, they arrive near a small mountain. The group stands before a large cave and Asha confirms that the arsonist is hiding inside. Bison looks at Turan and addresses him as Mr. Turan, asking him to come to the front with her while telling the rest of her group to stay back. Bison creates a blue light spell and they enter inside, where the blue light illuminates the cave walls. Bison looks to Asha, asking her if the arsonist is still inside and checking if he is alone or if there are more people with him. Asha stares ahead with glowing blue eyes and confirms that there is only one person. They continue to walk inside and eventually enter a wide stone room, where they find a figure standing by several torches. This man is wicked-looking with a dirty red cloak over his shoulders. He looks at the group and asks what brings them to such an isolated place. Turan asks Asha if this guy is the arsonist, and she replies that she is picking up a strange scent from him, confirming that it is him. Bison steps forward to confirm it. She points an ice arrow at the man and asks if he is the killer who kidnapped and burned the villagers nearby. The man grins and replies that he is not quite sure what she means. Suddenly, his expression changes as he raises his hand, and a massive explosion of flames erupts, filling the entire stone room. Asha and the other knights are thrown back by this explosion and they scream in pain. Turan reacts immediately, holding up his hands and activating his magic tool. He saves himself and Bison from the flames. The arsonist is surprised by Turan's resistance. Bison takes advantage of the opening and fires an arrow that hits the arsonist in the leg and makes him fall to his knees, but the arsonist isn't done yet. He slams his hand to the ground to use another magic. Two massive arms made of rock rise from the ground and surround Turan and Bison. Turan looks at them and thinks about how the arsonist can use earth manipulation, since he had thought the man had a flame bloodline. Those massive arms attack them, but Turan manages to dodge that attack, while Bison was slow and got hit by the blow. Turan takes his stance and starts spinning his sling with a rock inside. The arsonist sees him and raises his hand to attack with another magic, but before he can activate the spell, Turan launches the attack. The speed and power of this rock are so powerful that the madman cannot dodge, and his hand is destroyed by it. The madman cries in pain as blood gushes out from the wound and he starts falling to the ground, while Turan rushes toward him. While on the move, he starts rubbing his fingers to generate a small sparkle of lightning. Turan then activates his newly learned lightning magic and attacks the arsonist with it. As soon as the attack hits him, he screams and loses consciousness. Because he has fainted, the massive stone arms begin to lose their form and crumble into harmless pieces. Turan stands above the defeated enemy, still charging his lightning magic to make sure the man does not recover. Bison walks over through the settling dust and asks him if he has successfully taken the man down. Turan pants slightly from the exertion and states that it is most likely finished. He tells her that he will handle this one personally and asks her to please check on the others in the group. Turan takes out some seeds and throws them onto the ground. He then uses his magic, causing several vines to grow from the seeds and wrap tightly around the arsonist. Turan thinks that since he has sealed the man's sight and movement, it is over. He uses his dagger to tap the prisoner and tells him to wake up immediately. The arsonist tries to use his mana, but Turan leans in and presses the dagger against his throat. He sternly demands that the man not move even an inch and issues a final warning, stating that if the man tries to release any more mana, he will kill him on the spot. The blindfolded man asks who they are and how they could have possibly found this hidden place, while Turan calmly replies that they have their own ways and asks for absolute confirmation that he is the arsonist responsible for the village massacres. The man remains silent and stubborn until Turan stabs the dagger into the man's leg, causing him to cry out in pain. Turan demands an immediate answer, asking why a rogue noble would spend his time burning local commoners alive. Deep in his thoughts, he mentally notes that a cold-blooded murderer deserves absolutely no mercy. The man finally breaks and cries out that it was God who commanded him to do it, claiming that if he burns the flesh and souls of those he deems sinners, he will be able to reach God himself. Bison and the others stare in a mixture of confusion and horror, asking what on earth he is talking about. The man continues his maniacal raving, saying that God taught him the secret to obtaining other bloodlines, explaining that if he just burns a few more humans, he will finally be able to obtain the flame bloodline that he so desperately craves. Bison is repulsed and asks if this isn't just total madness, wondering how anyone could think they could obtain an innate bloodline like that, and to commit such massacres for a reason like that is so ridiculous. Turan's face darkens as he remembers Midden saying that even commoners can gain power by killing demonic beasts, and he has seen many mages do it. The arsonist continues to mutter about how he just needs to burn a few more villages, and he will have the power of flames. Turan, gripping his own arm, thinks to himself that maybe this is not just the delusion of a madman, and considers the horrifying idea that perhaps he has discovered a secret of this world. After obtaining all the necessary information, Turan instantly severs the arsonist's head without a second of hesitation. The decapitated corpse collapses onto the floor in front of the assembled group. The gruesome sight causes several members to feel a deep sense of dread, leading Bison to question her comrades' reactions as Gil struggles to find his words, but eventually explains that killing someone who is tied up and defenseless feels more like a cold-blooded slaughter. Hearing this, Bison immediately scolds him for such foolish talk, reminding him that they all would have perished if things had gone differently and wondering how he could feel sympathy for a murderer. She declares that even skinning the villain alive would not atone for his countless victims, while Turan quietly turns away to search the room. As he walks, he discovers a book lying on the ground and picks it up, beginning to examine the contents hidden within the pages. Upon opening the book, Turan finds a map with markings that match the exact locations of the burned villages, realizing he now has definitive evidence of the man's guilt. While looking through the pages, he notices something unusual and mutters that the combination formulas are unlike any he has seen, wondering if the voice of God taught the arsonist these secrets. Turan remains lost in thought until Bison calls out to him. She suggests they begin the mana absorption process and leave to inform the nearby people that the arsonist is finally dead. Soon after, the entire group begins to absorb mana using their respective techniques. The scene shifts to an official holding a reward for the madman's defeat, congratulating Lady Bison on the capture and calling her a rising star of House Carmen. She accepts the box and dismisses the praise, telling him that he flatters her far too much. She then turns to Turan and mentions that her unit plans to hunt more demonic beasts, asking him what his own plans are, having already handed him his fair share of the reward money. Turan answers immediately, stating that he is heading straight for Abacha. Bison approaches Turan and warns him in a low voice not to repeat the madman's claims from the day before, to which Turan calmly promises silence, reflecting that such knowledge would cause massive chaos. After hearing that, Bison nods and bids him farewell, leading her team away as they all go their separate ways. Turan watches them depart and decides there is no need to share his suspicions since he lacks definitive proof. He continues his journey alone through the desolate desert region where, as far as he can see, no one else remains. After some time, he starts to sense a shift in the atmosphere and eventually pauses to observe the change. As Turan concentrates, he realizes that the air is becoming increasingly humid with every step he takes. He snaps his fingers to test his magic and observes a noticeable shift in his elemental powers. A small flame flickers in his hand as he reflects that his fire power has decreased while his mana consumption has increased, making fire magic difficult in this environment. On the other hand, a large sphere of water manifests effortlessly in his opposite palm. Turan reasons that since fire magic is weakening while water magic becomes easier, it can only mean one thing. He looks into the distance and spots a shimmering water reflection and immediately begins to walk in that direction. After a while, he arrives at a port town where ships are docked, concluding that this environment confirms he has successfully reached Abacha. The scene transitions to the interior of the city, where a group of sailors is deep in conversation as one man asks if they are setting sail the following day. The captain, a man with a distinct eye patch, confirms they are heading back to the Emerald Desert, while complaining about mermen pelting their route with harpoons and ruining their hull. Another man asks if the situation is truly that dire, and an old sailor adds that they must also contend with ruthless pirates. The eye patch captain groans that they will be paying for funerals instead of wages at this rate, muttering that they desperately need a skilled knight for protection. At that exact moment, Turan approaches the table and stops in front of them, asking if they are indeed heading toward the Emerald Desert. The captain looks up and tells him bluntly that they leave tomorrow, but since the ship is not a cruise vessel, there is no room for passengers unless they leave behind a barrel of booze. Hearing this, Turan remains calm and places his hand over a cup resting on the table. Seeing this, the captain asks what he is doing, but he is silenced when the cup is suddenly encased in solid ice. The captain is visibly shaken by this sudden and impressive display of magic. The other men at the table stand up respectfully and ask why such an illustrious guest is in such a humble place, but Turan tells them to speak normally as he is only there to ask for a job. The one-eyed captain's attitude shifts instantly as he asks what he can do for the night, and Turan explains that he wants to reach the Emerald Desert as a hireling rather than a passenger. He offers to repel any mermen or pirates that attack them, suggesting they consider his service as payment for his passage. The captain realizes Turan overheard their plight, but he sighs and explains that the ship is poor and cannot offer a room or wage fit for a night. Turan tells him that the pay and conditions are irrelevant since his only goal is to reach Enrol. Hearing this, the captain is shocked by the knight's resolve, but he quickly settles the deal, telling Turan that he can join the crew immediately. The scene shifts to a different location currently being consumed by total chaos. Multiple houses are engulfed in flames during a brutal and sudden attack by dark elves. Soldiers are struggling desperately to defend the area against the invaders. A dark elf notices a lone soldier and charges at him, but the soldier manages to cut the creature down. However, the fight is far from over as another dark elf rushes toward him, and he somehow manages to kill that one as well. He continues to slay many of them in a desperate struggle, but the enemies continue to emerge without stopping. Seeing this, the soldier realizes that he will not be able to handle the endless wave at this rate. Just as a monster is about to strike, golden lightning bolts rain down from the sky. The lightning obliterates every single monster in the immediate vicinity. The soldier looks up in awe and sees Mesa flying majestically above him. He breathes a sigh of relief and thanks her, but Mesa remains calm and orders him to rejoin his unit. The soldier obeys immediately and rushes back into the heat of the fray. A man comes flying near Mesa and calls out to her. It is Kadram Arabian, vice commander of the Arabian subjugation force, and he asks if she has sustained any injuries. Mesa tells him she is fine, though Kadram warns her not to push herself since her life is worth more than a few nights, a concern she ignores while asking for a situation report. Kadram answers that the situation is manageable and they will retake the region soon, though the enemy tunnels have not yet been located. Mesa tells him to notify her as soon as they are found because she intends to enter them herself. After saying this, she flies away without another word. Seeing her dismissive attitude, Kadram clicks his tongue in annoyance, muttering that his brother raised her to be far too spoiled and calling her an annoying girl. He worries that if she keeps this up, she will end up suffering the same fate as her mother and brother. Back on Turan's side, he stands on the ship while staring out at the endless expanse of the ocean. He reflects on his journey, thinking that even if he reaches the Zahar lands, he has no idea how he will find any leads. He considers that charging into the Zahar family blindly would be dangerous, without even knowing his father's name or position. With only a portrait of his mother and a few of her belongings, he wonders how long it will take to uncover the truth, but his thoughts are interrupted as the one-eyed captain taps his shoulder. He jokes that Turan will dry up the sea if he keeps starring and asks what is on the knight's mind. Turan replies that he was just thinking about the vastness of the ocean, a sentiment the captain agrees with. He mentions that even sailors get sick of the sight after too long and asks if Turan is handling the seasickness well, to which Turan says he is fine. The captain notes he heard Turan has been learning the ropes from the bosun, from tying knots to handling the sails, adding that the bosun was excited to teach a knight the trade. Turan smiles and admits he thought it would be good to learn, finding that it was actually more fun than he expected. As they are talking, a crew member shouts that it is finally time for chow. The captain claps his hands and tells everyone to head to the mess hall. As they eat, an old man tells Turan the food isn't as good as land fare but expresses relief they have sauerkraut, explaining that without it, they would all die of gum disease. The old man explains it is a disease where gums bleed until a person dies, but sour food helps cure it, noting that sauerkraut is the best method since fruit spoils so quickly. Turan finds this fascinating and asks how such a thing was discovered, to which the old man says the word simply spread over time. He mentions that before this was common knowledge, some people even resorted to eating raw mermaids, a fact that surprises Turan. Suddenly, a lookout shouts that there is a mid-sized vessel ahead at the 2 o'clock position. Someone asks if the approaching ship belongs to pirates. The lookout says he cannot tell for sure, but there is no family crest flying from the mast. The old man mutters that the weather was too good to be true and assumes they are definitely pirates. The captain shouts for the crew to prepare for combat, and they rush to grab weapons from the barrels. The old man approaches the captain to ask for the plan, suggesting they run, but the captain notes the enemy is faster and they will eventually be caught. The captain thinks about the dire situation and asks Turan if he can handle the threat. Turan declares that as long as there is no noble or knight among the enemies, it will not be a problem. Hearing that, the captain orders the ship to turn and take the fight to them, prompting the crew to cheer for Turan as they shout for the enemy's deaths. The two ships draw close together. On the enemy ship, the pirates are armed and waiting, shouting for the sailors to stop and promising to spare their lives if they surrender. Turan wonders if they would actually spare the crew, but the old man asks if being tossed overboard after having their legs cut off counts as being spared. Turan notes that the reality of the situation is exactly as he suspected. He leaps from his ship and boards the pirate vessel alone. The pirates are shocked by his boldness and demand to know who he is. Turan uses his magic to lift water directly from the sea, turning it into deadly ice shards as the enemies try to rush him. He unleashes a barrage of ice shards that pierce through the pirates, leaving them screaming in agony. Turan glares at the survivors, saying there is no reason to spare their kind, as he begins to release a terrifying amount of mana.